good, right? Yeah.
It's like when TV switched to high def and everybody's wrinkles came through.
Oh,
they were like,
yeah.
"Oh, it's too much."
Have you ever watched Star Wars? It looks like a high school production.
Yeah.
Okay, we're back. We had a little technical difficulty there. I don't know what happened. I hit the mic and killed everything, but we're back, and I forget where we were.
Let
But
me again.
It's talking about stuff.
Let's see.
that's the fun of the podcast. Is this is the height of informality.
Mm-hmm.
I know. We were talking, I think, about your first show in Weird Lightning,
Yeah.
and it was very interesting for me to see two electronic bands playing in Wheeling, and both very good bands. And
Thank you.
from having really not heard of you guys, you came out of nowhere and
Literally our basement.
yeah, right.
Nowhere.
I was blown away, and then our good friend Rich, we both know Rich Herndon,
Yeah.
and he kind of gave me a little bit of the backstory on you guys, and I think you guys even talked about a little bit at the show that if you, I think it's neat that not only are you a band, but you're first and foremost a married couple,
Yeah.
and your parents, and that has a lot to do with the band, right?
It does.
Absolutely, it does. So, you wanna tell them about it?
Tell them about being parents.
I guess. I don't know.
And how it
Well,
led you
actually,
to make music.
I was just thinking how appropriate it was that we literally this evening after you came over and we were here for a little while had to put the children to bed
Yeah.
before we were
That's
able to
perfect.
come downstairs and do the podcast, and that's exactly how Love and Data started.
Yeah. And
Because you are parents first.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
well, married first and parents tied.
Yeah.
And, but this is all the combination of who we grew up to be, as individuals. I think the most ironic part of it, and we had said at the last show, was we were together for 10 years. I've always made music. Amber's always been into literature. And just last year, she was, she writes literature at the same addictive level that I write music.
Yeah.
We approach it. It's basically like a diary for us. That's what we do to express our daily mental state.
Right. How you get it out, right? Yeah.
And so finally, last year after being together for 10 years, we were like, she came up with a poem, and we were like, that sounded really good for music.
Yeah.
Just all of a sudden, just stuck it together, and the band was formed.
We haven't stopped doing it since.
Yeah.
Like, it's
That-
really wonderful.
I think it's awesome that you were able to kind of organically come about the idea of putting in a band and
Yeah.
There was certainly nothing forced about it.
Yeah.
No, there wasn't, except for maybe like our life circumstances at the time. This came about sort of as a result of like life in a pressure cooker, because we met each other in Los Angeles. Nate was in the music industry. I was, who knows?
You're
Like,
both entertainment industry
Yeah.
in LA.
and so then we decided to leave and go to Nashville and start a family. So we went to go do that. But the problem is the same type of work that Nathan had been doing in Los Angeles wasn't available in Nashville or the surrounding area, because I'm actually from Murfreesboro, the geographical center of the state of Tennessee. It's about 20 miles south of Nashville, and that's where we moved to. But with that work being unavailable, after we tried a few different venues of employment, and they were great. They went out on tour with Sugarland, and that was great. The load of the work wasn't too heavy. They were basically weekend warriors, and we could kind of handle it, but we never liked the idea of life on the road, especially adding children to the situation. So he went back to school at Middle Tennessee State University and finished his science undergrad, applied to the West Liberty PA program, and got in. So we moved to West Virginia to completely change our lives. I mean, he was in grad school, and 3 weeks after we moved here, I found out I was pregnant with our second child. So
Oh my God.
everything got really intense for a while, and it was fine, but at the end of the day, watching Netflix just wasn't satisfying. There
Right.
had to be some kind of, we had to communicate with each other. We had to like do something special together, or if, that was it, we had to.
And we've always, even in our house in LA, we moved in together, and, of course, we moved into a one-bedroom place technically, but it had a converted two-car garage, and of course, our bedroom was,
The
like
small
6 by
room,
10,
which is fine.
Yeah.
and the converted garage is like 25 by 25.
Right.
So the studio went in there, and it just exploded in there. I mean, we had every instrument and setup you could imagine.
We actually had a drum
Yeah, drum
sound cage built and
There
Oh,
stuff.
nice.
So
there was
it was great.
There was a brass corner and a
Yeah.
strings corner and a turntable corner,
It was a
and it
really
was
good
awesome.
one.
And on the other end of the house, we had one of the only houses in the city of LA, I think, that had a barn. So,
We did.
so
We
that
just-
became our like painting studio,
Mhm.
and other things, larger and creative. But that's just who we've always been, is interested in the arts and creation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you can tell just when you walk in the house that you're artists and creative people, from the perfectly chosen shower curtain in the bathroom with the two colors that match the existing tile, and
I love that shower curtain.
the fun and interesting theme of, was it an elephant in a tuxedo, or so, yeah, and then when you come downstairs and you see painting equipment and all kinds of musical instruments and photography equipment, and you can tell that you're in a home of people that like to be doing something, like to be creative. And so it really makes sense that I think for people that do have that need to be creative, you want something more than just to go to work every day,
Yeah.
come home and do Netflix, and that need to create something as a way to, if nothing else, just get away from everything for a while and drop out of that life and express the different side of yourself.
But just stay conscious, and then try to make your day something that's a little bit deeper for yourself.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I've always said, everywhere I've lived, I don't know if it's necessarily the people or the people that we attract, but that's certainly one of our favorite parts of Wheeling, is that everybody
The
here
creativity
is so
here
DIY.
is amazing.
And a lot of people complain that there's like nothing to do or nothing comes out of here.
Oh,
Yeah.
the
And that's
opposite.
the best thing, is that if you want something to happen here, you just do it yourself.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And amazingly, like, the entire community comes out and supports
And they
you.
support you,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. It's. I think that people that complain that there's nothing to do it's because they don't want to do. They really don't want to do
Because
anything.
yeah. 'Cause
They want to be.
Absolutely.
They want to be entertained. they want to just magically
Yeah.
and what seems like a lot of work, which it is, playing in a band, making movies, doing a podcast. It requires a certain amount of effort, and there are times when you're hauling equipment into a movie
Yeah.
set at 6 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday.
Yep.
That's not fun. But then once you get it in there, it's fun, and
Right.
and so I think for the people, and there are a lot of people around here, that they do make that effort, and in a very eclectic way.
Yeah, extremely.
Absolutely.
There's a definite style to this area, I think.
And I think it couldn't exist without the community that exists here.
Yeah.
I told one of our friends that I've never lived in a non-competitive community before.
That's
you know,
very well put. Yeah.
ever. But this place is so supportive. I've never seen anything like it.
There's
It's
definitely
incredible.
not that spirit where I've been in other places where
Yeah.
if I'm winning, then that means you're losing, and people are your friends until you're perceived
Right.
as being
And
more
all this.
successful, and that's everybody wants to see everybody do well,
Absolutely.
and they appreciate that when someone does well, it's good for everybody.
Yeah.
And it was really great to see that your first time out, the place was packed, and
We
and
had
people were so
great
receptive
friends.
to really seeing, even though Weird Lightning or electronic band, they're a lot different than you guys. So
Totally, but
for you
they're
guys to come in and do your thing the first time and have everybody, well, of course it was very good, so that helps. But it was very unusual for Wheeling Brewing and for that crowd to see an electronic band, and everybody took to it like you would have thought that people had come to see you for the 10th time and that they were already big fans of the group, and even with a few technical problems, it was still a great show.
Yeah, the energy was fantastic
It
that
was.
night. I think everybody had a great time.
We were also lucky enough that, we've had recordings out for almost a year now. So
That's
people
true.
have been exposed to the music.
Yeah.
And that's a huge part of playing live, is people are familiar with it.
That's true.
If you're not going to do cover songs, then
Yeah,
at least have something that.
It is definitely helpful if people can kind of already are looking forward to hearing the songs. And,
Totally.
Yeah.
but I know for me, it was just didn't really know anything about it other than I think Richard said something to me right before you guys started playing, but and I was completely blown away. And
Oh, thank
of course, I love electronic music anyhow, but it was as soon as you guys started playing, I'm like, oh, this is way more than what I expected, and I was very pleasantly surprised. And then when I realized that you guys have been doing this for quite a while, and you could tell that you put a lot of time and practice into it. It wasn't just a thrown together band.
No, in the beginning, I guess we never really expected it to do anything or to be anything.
No.
We were just like, let's just do this, and then okay, we've got it recorded. Well, we like it, so let's put it out and we'll just put it out there, you know. And then if it weren't for Bethany Decker and Josh Brommer of Weird Lightning, we never would have brought it out of the basement. They asked us to do it, and so we said sure, you know, because it had been in the back of our heads that it would be a fun challenge.
Yeah.
And it would be kind of cool to see how we would do this thing that we do in the basement, like live for people. So it was awesome of them for being the catalyst for that to come to fruition.
I mean, I'm very grateful, you know, for about 20 years I've been contemplating on how to do electronic music live.
Yeah.
Because it is such a technical feat just to be able to pull it off in an interesting way. You know, I've of course DJ'd many times, and depending on how scratchy or whatever you know, I can't stand to go watch like people that just turn knobs, or even worse, step away from the turntables and just pump fades.
And just let it play.
It
Yeah,
drives me
yeah.
so crazy. No, I respect producers, but you know, if you're just gonna, you know, play an iPod basically, then don't even bring out the turntables.
Yeah, you don't need it there.
Yeah, just bring out like train a dance team and like
Just email me a playlist and I'll download the
get
music.
an elephant and dance it around.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, what was really cool about seeing you guys play was that even though there were the two of you and you had all this electronic equipment, it was still a show. There was a lot of performance aspect to it, and that it wasn't like you were just doing a repetition of the material, but that you were actually putting on a show, and that was really kind of surprising that was the first time that you guys had played out, because and was that your first time singing in front of people?
That was my first time singing as a person in the front. Yeah, absolutely. I've done it a couple of times, but I've been nicely tucked in the background, thank you, and it was wonderful.
Well, you took to it like a fish to water. You know.
It was really fun, and I've acted in 1,000 different things. So I just flipped that switch in my head, and I was like, you can't be nervous about it anymore.
Yeah.
Because it's time to do it. So
and I was telling her there's no reason to
act.
be like, you know, since the first recording that we made together with her singing, her voice is like the quintessential pop vocal. It's unbelievable.
He loves me. He's a sweetheart.
You do have a great voice, and
I appreciate that.
and it really it all melds together perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes from spending a lot of time working on it.
And living together.
And living together. Yeah.
And understanding each other's rhythms. And so then I think when we come down here to do this, I'm almost thinking like, oh, well, he may want to go there with it, so maybe I'll go over here. Maybe that'll kind of come together.
Yeah.
But, you know, you can't be together for 11 years and not think a little similarly.
Right.
We definitely both enjoy similar genres of music. You know,
Definitely.
we love dirty South hip hop
Mhm.
and Daft Punk and funk, and you know,
Portishead, just electronic, you know, music.
Well, but we also have, you know, varied roots in music.
Definitely.
I don't think Amber has ever been a fan of a hardcore band.
Yeah.
I don't want to isolate anybody, and
No, of
I
course
won't
not.
say that nobody could ever change my mind. I'll just say that cadence
I'm just
of
saying
music
when we were
is
young.
not, it's harsh to me.
It's not for you. Yeah.
Exactly.
And-
Whereas Nate came through that tradition of like, you know, hardcore rock
Yeah.
music, and I get that.
And she grew up, you know, her grandmother still watches old Opry videos, and
yeah.
Sure.
and she knows every classic country and and bluegrass song.
Probably the biggest Dolly
So-
Parton fan you'll ever
Yeah.
meet.
I love Dolly Parton. I love old country.
Oh
There's
yeah,
there's
absolutely. Yeah,
poster.
there's Miss Dolly.
Oh,
She's
yeah.
Our daughter is half named after Dolly Parton and half named after Salvador Dali. So
Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
Oh yeah. Oh, that was no accident.
Who did He Stopped Loving Her Today? Who was
George
Jones?
Jones.
Yes. That and Johnny Cash. And
Oh,
I should
yeah.
remember his name because he's one of my favorite country artists. But I don't listen to old country music that much. But
Yeah, it's always in the echoes of the back of
Yeah.
my mind, but it's never something that I
And,
really break out anymore.
I was lucky. My best friend when I lived in Dayton, Jay, he made me a mixtape of old country music, and this was an actual tape
Yeah.
because it was the '90s, and I had a tape deck in my truck, and I listened to that thing all the time, and it had all those great old country songs,
Nice.
a lot of Johnny Cash, and
I mean, especially if you're driving a truck.
if you're driving a truck, yeah.
You're just doing it wrong if you're not listening to,
That's
to
right.
old
Yeah.
country on a cassette tape.
I was the only guy, and I guess I was showing my Ohio Valley roots because I lived in town. I lived like down near downtown, and I had a 4-wheel drive truck with. I don't even have that now that I live in the country, but I just thought it was fun to bring a little bit of the country into the city. That thing, not only did it never go off road, it never was out into the country. It was always, but it was funny, and it was. You could always tell where I was because it was the only guy with the big roll bar and the fog lights. I always like to shake it up a little bit. You're not truly being different unless you're
Unless
pushing
you're
it.
truly being different.
Yeah, and I took it to obviously the ridiculous level of having a 4-wheel drive pickup truck in the middle of a city.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But and I've been in a few bands, and so even amongst your best friends, it's not always easy to be in a band. So even though you guys have been married for a long time and you get along very well,
Mm-hmm.
it's still not a sure thing that you would have been able to come together and make music because it could have just been where that one area that you can't get on the same
That's
page
true.
or your styles wouldn't match or something, and so it is a really special thing. I think
We
that you
got
have to-
lucky, and also we had to take our communication to a new place.
Mm-hmm.
So this, not only you're right, it could have crashed and burned. You know, it could have been really nasty. But we got lucky, and we were able to get a little bit deeper with each other. You know, there were a couple of times because Nate has been so musical since he was so young, and he's really good at all of this. And there were a couple of times that I had to slow him down and say, "Listen, I need you just to break this into a
Yeah.
baby step for me really quickly." Show it to me one time this way and I promise I'll have it, you know. And he would then change his style and work with me that way,
Yeah.
and then it would work, and vice versa, like when it came
Yeah.
to kind of lyrical direction and stuff.
And both of us, we respect each other's taste enough, and are not too self-conscious to not accept criticism. You know,
Yeah.
we'll
Oh,
we'll
for
get into a
sure.
beat and be working on it and you know, put a couple hours in, and then all of a sudden one of us is like, nope, I don't like it,
And we'll
and just scrap
start
it.
over.
And you can-
yeah,
and
do
you-
something different.
and you have that comfort level that you can be honest about.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
Yeah,
it's of course
absolutely.
it's of course a little bit hurtful. You know,
Sure.
You're like,
Nobody
I thought that was
likes
cool.
to
Like,
do
I
something
started
that
doing
somebody
this,
else
yeah.
doesn't like.
And then
you
you're
know,
like,
but-
hey, yeah, if you don't like it, then I don't like it. And usually in the end, it's like, yeah, it turns out I didn't like that either.
Like you listen to it a couple days later, and you're like, yeah, but maybe you pull a piece from that then, and you're like, but I
Yeah,
like that bass
exactly.
line, so I'm gonna keep that, and we're gonna make that something else.
That's always the best part of, especially I think electronic, well, any music, is the experimental part of it. That's why everybody's first album is the
Absolutely.
best. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? It's because it's
You're
an
the
experimental
freest.
process, and
Yeah.
you're literally listening to these people's minds be expanded, basically.
yeah, you're not locked into an identity that then you feel like you have to keep up with.
Yeah.
Unless you're Radiohead and the Beatles, where you
Yeah.
reinvent yourself all the time.
Yeah. And then your fans hate you.
Yeah, right. And I know kind of the same thing happens with filmmaking. If me and one of the guys, we don't necessarily agree on how something should go, oftentimes it's me and Desi, my cinematographer. We have competing ideas, but what we find out is because we're friends and we communicate well, that the solution that we come up with is not only one that we both agree on, but it's also better than the original
Right.
suggestions that
Yeah.
either of us
Right.
had. And so by not just saying, wow, and being a tyrant and having it all go one way, that ability to compromise does make everything work out
Absolutely,
better.
because I feel like we both feel like if either one of us has misgivings about something, then there's something there. Then
Yeah.
there's something that maybe at that moment we're not quite hearing, but that it's not solid yet.
Yeah.
So
And
let's get it there.
I think what Nate said, if you don't like it, then I don't like it.
Right,
And
yeah.
that it's kind of, especially with two people, it's kind of nice where once we both agree on this, then we can move forward. And if one of us is not happy with it, then let's figure out how to make it work. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I was struck by you guys when I first met you, and then I should mention that we're here at their house, and they invited me over for dinner before, and it was a delicious dinner and a great conversation.
Thank
We had
you,
to be
James.
careful. Oh, well, thank you.
You're welcome.
And this delicious limeade, which I haven't had in a long time.
I mean, it is fresh.
And the food was great. We had to make sure we didn't talk about music over dinner, but we had no problem talking about vans and gardening and
Everything.
a bunch of different topics. And at Wheeling Brewing, and then again tonight, I was just struck by how nice you guys are.
Aw,
You're very
thanks.
nice people, and you're a great couple. You seem to really get along and respect each other, and that has to make a big difference when it comes to making music together.
It does.
We thrive on positivity.
Absolutely.
That's the basis of our making music. One of the big reasons we do this, I think. I don't know if it sounds strange or not, but we're both kind of feminists.
Yeah.
And there is definitely a lack of strong, positive female lyricists and songwriters. Even the ladies that we hear on the radio that we think we respect one minute, the next song comes out and you're like, oh, you just blew all of that.
Aw.
So
Well, and especially I'll say in some of the worlds that Nate and I have grown up listening to music in the hip hop world, every time I find a strong female MC, I immediately take her work to our daughters because
Yeah.
we're raising two young women and we want them to be two strong grown women. And I show them their work and I say, here, this is original, this is wonderful. Our friends Kill the Computer just produced a record for Lana Shea, who is fantastic, out of Los Angeles. Anyway, it's a great record, and she's a great example of a modern female MC who's willing to take some chances and to be really artistic and to come across with a beautiful product that is
Yeah.
not what maybe people are used to hearing, but maybe what maybe it would be
They
nice
need
if
to
they
be
heard
used-
it
yeah,
more
yeah.
often, in bigger venues. So anyway, but that's, I think, kind of more what he's speaking to.
Yeah, and I'll even revise my statement a little. Maybe not so much that we're both feminists, but our songs are, I think, intended to be love songs for each other.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the essence of all of them.
Yeah.
Which, so far, actually,
because we love each other that much.
it's so true.
That's
We're
awesome.
so cheesy, but it's so true. I cannot wait to get down here at the end of the day. When it's been a long day, I just can't wait to get down here.
It is so important to have that thing that you look forward to doing. That while you're going throughout your day, that you're kind of thinking about, oh, this is how I want to do it, and then they finally get down there and actually be able to put it into action. And I think most of the best creative people, like you guys said, you didn't think that you would necessarily, there was no goal to play out. It was just, we enjoy doing this, so we're going to do it. And I think that the stuff that I enjoy doing the most, it's things that I'm not really thinking about any kind of an end game.
Yeah.
It's that I enjoy the process of doing it. And I would make the podcast if there were no downloads, and I don't really try to look at it too often. And because the fact is, this is the part that I enjoy.
Yeah.
And what happens afterwards is out of my hands anyhow.
And thank you for doing these podcasts.
Absolutely.
It's
It's a great way to honor our little valley here.
I like to try to highlight the great people and what they're doing around here, and for me it's just great because I get some good meals like I did tonight, and I get to learn a lot, and I get to meet some really interesting people, because I met you guys at the show and you're nice people, but it would have been weird if you guys would have just invited me over for dinner to hang out and talk after meeting me for a couple minutes.
No, but there
Come
being
on.
like some sort of an artistic process to it.
Yeah.
But I love that you differentiated between the process and the product, because I had, when I was a teenager and I was in governor's school in Tennessee, I had a great acting teacher bring up for the first time to me the difference between those two parts of rehearsal and then putting on the show. Because to me, it was just rehearsal was necessary to then get to perform.
Right.
And when he said that he was much more interested in the process than the product, I was like, oh my God, you must be the most boring old man on the face of the earth. And now here I am, I just turned 39, and I am so much more interested in the process than the product. Because to me, the process is just your daily life. And the more art that you can weave into your daily life, the more you can write, create, make, the more you can do yourself, the more you can customize your life, just the more rich your experience is.
I mean, your art is a reflection of your life,
The two things are just
if you're
tied
doing
together.
it right, I think.
Yeah, I think,
absolutely.
If you enjoy the process, then it doesn't seem like work, and it is something where if you had to force yourself to come downstairs because you wanted to put out a record and we have to get this done, it would show. And when it really is about the process, that's where it also shows in the end product, because it's more authentic and you take more time to do it well, and there's I don't know, it's kind of corny to say, but you can feel the love in it. And I know when we make movies, you spend all this time making a movie and then you show it one night, and that's the worst thing about making movies is the premieres, because
they're kind of stressful.
It's stressful.
And it's kind
stressful.
of final, in a way. It's like, here's the product, and
when the fun part was like, how do we want to do this scene, or like, what else can we invent with this?
Or then it's like,
I'm speaking to
now
your
what's
process
next?
now.
Yeah, because that is the completion of, like, you just crossed the finish line, and now it's usually we already had something else started, but it is because once you show it in public, it's done. You can't really I don't go back and mess with them, and I always just find it the social aspects, even though I'm a very social person, the idea that everybody came out to see a movie that I made, I feel like you shouldn't have taken, I'm wasting your time to come see my, and I know people don't feel that way, and then of course you want to say hi to everybody that took the time to come to your movie, and but you never have enough time, and but the actual process of making it and getting together with the guys and girls, and one of the things that struck me, and I know I've mentioned it on here several times, Sue Beth Warren was an actress in one of our movies, and she's done a lot of plays, and we were up at TSG. She was playing a newspaper editor, and we did the scene 4 or 5 times, and I said, Sue Beth, it's great. There's a couple things I want to try. Do you mind if I indulge me and do a couple more takes? And she said, this is the first movie I've ever done, and I don't know if I'll ever do another one again, and we can be here all day. And I thought, oh yeah, she's not up here doing me a favor. She's having fun being in the movie. And I think it really made me conscious that's why we're here, is because we enjoy doing this, and then also to be real conscious of the people that you work with, to try to make sure that it's also people that are really there because they love what they do.
When you get the right people in the mix, it can just be absolutely magic, life-changing. Just the right group of people.
It really shows in the work in the end. And me and Nate were talking about being in bands and how many. I think some weeks I'd have 3 band practices through the week, and then one of the bands would be playing, or maybe both of them would be playing on the weekend, and how much time I devoted to that. But it never felt like it was a chore. No. I got to hang out with my friends and play music in a crappy basement underneath a shopping center for rehearsal.
It was like Pinky and the Brain, you were just plotting on taking over the world.
That's right, yeah.
You were just young, and there were no limits.
Did you think about this is a nice place to rehearse? We had some really awful basements, and we literally did play in underneath a shopping center, and it was like a utility closet. It was probably about this size, and luckily we had our own bathroom, but it was tile floor, drop ceiling, and concrete. And it was a kind of a depressing room with the big fluorescent lights, but we loved it.
Was it a rockin' show?
Those were
Best
some
night of your life?
It was.
Some of my favorite shows were literally in abandoned warehouses.
Yeah.
I mean, there's all kinds of factories around here. Right. There were, places where skaters just came and set up ramps, and
Yeah.
and just skated the crap out of that old factory, and then we'd come and play a show at night, and like somebody had, pirated some electricity from somewhere.
There's
Those are the best shows.
There is something about that underground nature of there was in Dayton there was a thing it was called New Space Underground, and they did a lot of rock shows, but they didn't have an actual venue. It was wherever they could rent a place, and this was pre-Facebook, and so it was really word of mouth. And I know over by the Cargill corn plant stunk, but there was like a pavilion there, and every now and then they'd have a show there, or they'd have one in a bigger room underneath the shopping center or the electricians union hall, which they actually had Fugazi come in there a couple times, which was great. And something about the fact that we were in an unusual place that wasn't designed for this, that made it even more fun.
Yeah, the volunteer
Absolutely.
fire departments. And
Yeah, they pull the trucks out so you can have a punk rock show.
Yeah.
Even now, I get excited about my projects. I love when I'm lying in bed at night and I can't wait to get up in the morning. Oh, no, that's okay. That was Nate's mom. They came over. They had just gotten back from a trip, right?
They did, yeah. They
Yeah.
actually just took a train from San Diego to Chicago with their oldest son, Nate's oldest brother, and they helped us put the girls to bed. Netch actually just finished reading The Empire Strikes Back to Lexi.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I'm not sure what Lainey had tonight. Probably green eggs and ham.
Yeah.
So they're down for the count. We have the best in-laws in the world. We're family
Well, not
rich
my in-laws,
everywhere.
yeah.
No, your in-laws are really good.
Oh yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, careful. They might be listening.
No. Oh, I'm sure they will.
Yeah.
They're very supportive too.
They're awesome.
That's good.
Yeah, we're both lucky with family.
But that when you're lying in bed and that project or whatever it is that you're working on is kind of get you so excited that you can't wait to get up and get
Yes.
started on it. Right now I'm airbrushing and doing 3 custom motorcycle helmets, and I was lying in bed last night, and it was 6 o'clock in the morning, and I started thinking about it, and all right, I got to get out of
You
bed.
just couldn't even
I got to
stay
get
in.
started. I want to put this idea into action.
Nice.
And
Yes.
Yeah.
That to me is the essence of all of this creativity, and the essence of the point of it
Yeah.
is and however I think everybody's creative in whatever capacity, but it's whatever generates that feeling, that drive, and that motivation to focus on that one
Yeah.
thing, and it brings all of the best out of you.
I think that's why I do my best writing in the morning,
Yeah.
music producing, because when you're lying in bed and all of a sudden just some little beat or melody comes into your head, and instantly I'd grab a cup of coffee and come down here.
Yeah.
It could be like 6 in the morning, and I'll be writing for the next 3 or 4 hours.
because
Yeah.
that
And then
idea,
usually I'm like, that's crap, and I throw it away.
No.
but it is part of. But even if it is something that you throw away, because I've done a lot of painting projects like that and film projects, and pretty much everything I've done because I'm not naturally gifted, so I have to make a bunch of mistakes to finally get to the good one. But it is all part of what gets you there.
Mhm.
And the fact is, the 3 hours, even though you threw it away at the end, you had a blast.
Yeah, and you learned a
Absolutely.
ton. Like we were saying, we could be a couple hours into a song and just be like, I don't like it. Let's go to the next one. But the idea that you started with evolved into some experiment that you learned a valuable lesson from, even if it didn't all kind of meld together in the way that you thought would first work out.
Mhm.
But you can still take those concepts and those techniques into the next project.
Yeah, that somebody had said once, and I think it really makes sense. There's success and learning. There's really not failure, and it's
Absolutely.
true, And I think I was saying at dinner that a lot of times for the movies, I would spend weeks coming up with a game plan for the day, and by 9 o'clock in the morning, that was done. But the fact that I took the time to prepare it and thought about it that much,
Yeah.
that it really wasn't wasted time, even though the physical notes that I took the time to write out were never referred to. The fact that I did write them out and went through that whole process, it was in my head enough that I really didn't need the notes.
Yeah, like
And-
stretching for a race, right? Your
Yeah.
mind was sort of fluid in the right direction.
Yeah, it gets you
There you
and gets you thinking in the right direction.
Well, a couple of my favorite sayings, which I have many, but you never learn anything from finishing first.
That's true. That's very true.
And if you're, well, we used to say this in the classical world, when you're practicing a piece and you make a mistake, that you shouldn't feel bad. That's actually a moment to celebrate. It's like an aha moment, because now you know where you actually need to focus your energy.
Yeah.
Because anybody can play the stuff that's fun, because if it's fun, then you can already play it.
Yeah.
Right. It's stuff that's hard and you don't want to practice, that that's what you need to focus your time and energy on.
And I think that's something that once people realize that doing things that are hard and that are challenging and that you don't necessarily succeed at right away, that's what makes it fun.
Yeah.
I like doing hard things. I like doing things that I'm not necessarily good at. This year when I became a handyman, I'm not handy. I had to learn how to do everything. I watched a lot of YouTube videos.
Yeah.
And so I got on a lot of jobs where I go, I think I know how to do this. And then I always figure it out, but you don't always know that you will. I knew nothing about filmmaking when I decided to make movies, and I knew nothing about. Only research I did on a podcast is I already had the recorder for the films, and I researched these microphones to buy, and Stephen Moore was my first guest. So
nice.
the only thing I really did to prepare for that was I asked Stephen if he would do a podcast, and he said yes, and we sat at his kitchen table, and I just winged it. And I still wing it every time.
I'd like to shout out for Steve.
He's awesome, isn't he?
Oh, man, I don't know that we've ever been formally introduced, but he was the reason I started playing bass in hardcore bands.
Is it really?
Yeah, because I saw him play bass. I was like, I want to do that.
and he's super successful. The American Canjo, the instruments he makes, and Secret Devil Tuning. Although I think he changed the name now.
I'm not sure.
Oh, was it?
I think he does have a new name but he is incredible, and
Yeah.
I didn't really know him very well when he came on the podcast, and I asked him, and I'd never done one before, and he said, sure, I'll do it. And so it was kind of cool. He's responsible for this happening, because if he had said no, or get a few under your belt, I may not have actually started.
Yeah.
And it's okay to suck at first, I think.
Oh,
well, I think the
certainly
reason.
glad you started and continued.
Thank you.
We were talking about local rock stars and like the local celebrity status that they have. That he's definitely one for me. That's why we've never met formally, is because I'm like too scared to approach him.
And it's funny because he's just such a normal guy, and
not in my mind.
Yeah.
He's an idol in my mind.
Well, that's really nice. And I couldn't think of a nicer guy for you to idolize, and he really is a great dude, and I was really bummed when he moved away, because I was just getting to know him when I found out that he was moving, and he's such a warm and fun guy, and we still keep in touch on Facebook.
Yeah, the world's a small place these days.
But that's a good influence to have.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think one of the interesting things about talking with musicians and about your story and everything is that for people that maybe don't have that thing where they're really creative and they have something that drives them, that I think what you find is if you do feed that part of your soul by doing things, it starts to grow more and more. You don't wake up one day and all of a sudden have an addiction to writing poetry, but you can, and
Sure.
I find that the more I achieve things, and the more I take the time to do creative things, the more I'm driven to take on new things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I find that as well. And for me, it was after we've always both been creative people, but having our kids put that into hyperdrive, because I have been staying at home with our kids for the past 5 years now, and I have turned into a domestic MacGyver. I no longer look at my environment as decorative items and things to be done. I look at my environment as what can I use and what can I put together to make whatever creative idea that they have come to life. So we spend a lot of time doing that during the day, and then it translates into, whereas Nate loves to get up early and start early, I'm a night owl. And I've basically been reprogrammed by my current lifestyle, because they go to bed so early and get up so early. But if I have that wonderful opportunity to stay up till, 12, to really push it to 1, I love to just sit and write, and it's almost like a just free flow. You just write and write
It's
and
pretty
write.
amazing the amount of work that she puts out, and not only that, just like the quality of everything that she does,
Thanks.
lyrically, and you know, she grew up studying as a Shakespearean actress, and has been in countless plays, and that's what she was in Hollywood. She was an actress too, so that's always just been her gift. You know?
Yeah.
And not her only gift, of course, but
That's it. That's the one.
yeah. But I think that's true. Kind of what you were saying. It's people aren't instantly creative. You don't wake up one day and be creative. But the first thing, the first step to creativity, I think, is research.
Yeah.
Because first you have to emulate.
Yeah.
Before you can start to create.
That's true. I think the
yourself.
first step is dissatisfaction, because you
Yeah.
have to be uncomfortable to
Yeah.
want to change something, and
Yeah.
then to fill it with something that's
Yeah.
positive. Hopefully, you fill it with something that's positive, and then move forward.
Well, James and I were talking earlier, you know, and I had mentioned to him the whole reason I got into making, like, producing and recording was because I wasn't going to spend $20 on a damn CD in
Right.
1996.
Right? Yeah.
I didn't have $20 in the first place.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
so I was like, well, if I want to listen to music in the car,
Necessity is the mother of
I'm not going to
invention.
spend money on it. I'm going to make it. So
And that's and
I don't know if that is a very Ohio Valley mind frame.
I'll agree with that.
But
that's kind of, you know, I like cars and motorcycles, and I can't necessarily go out and buy the coolest car or motorcycle, so I have to make it, or I have to take what I have and make it cool. And there's something about that necessity for it, and I think that thing that takes you into that realm of being creative is, I think a lot of people have ideas for things that they would like to do, but then you have to get off your butt and do it.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so whereas other people might have an idea for a poem or a song or something, and then they roll back over and go to bed instead, and until you have that experience of rolling out of bed
Yes.
and actually doing it, it gets fed. But if you don't take that first step, it's really hard to see how it all happens and to get the reward of it. And I think as a musician, you've probably heard people say, oh, I always wanted to play the drums, or I always
Yeah.
wanted to play guitar. And I heard somebody, this is not an original thought of mine, but they said, well, no, you really didn't, because if you did, you would have done it. Because there's nobody stopping you that
well, there's one person.
yeah,
There's
one
one-
person, yeah,
one
because
person.
you can, I don't care, unless you're utterly poor, you can scrape together enough money to buy a Craigslist guitar or
Yeah.
whatever it is. Or when I was a kid, I took old buckets and wooden
Yeah.
spoons. I was
To
that
To learn
kid.
rhythm.
I made my own little homemade drum sets
We gotta
until
record that.
That's freaking
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
we should do like an all made instrument record. That would be incredible.
I actually did some research on these homemade drum kits made out of that people actually get some really cool sounds out
I've
of it.
seen a couple videos. Yeah.
And some of those street musicians
Yeah.
that do that as well. But so to take that step and really, you have to bring it to life at some point.
Yeah,
You have to take that step, and then once you do, it feels good, and then you get confidence that you can do anything, and the idea that things aren't just ideas, but they are an action. So yeah, if you really wanted to play guitar, you would find a way to either borrow one or
Yeah.
somehow you
Not
would.
everybody wants to start with ta
And
ta
the
ti
crazy
ti ta
thing
is-
to
Yeah.
get to
Yeah,
Like-
that place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you start out as a consumer, you know, just passively listening to
Mm-hmm.
things. Then you gain a greater appreciation for it. And then you get a true interest where you're like, I specifically remember the moment I heard Dr. Dre's Chronic. You know, I was walking home from school. My friend had his, I forget, it was probably a Discman in those days.
Yes.
And he let me hear it, and I was like, how in the hell
How
are they
make
making
Yeah,
those
right?
sounds?
I was like, I have got to figure out how they are doing this. And I did. And sadly enough, I was totally disappointed in the end. I was like, most of that's straight ripped off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But still, I saw the process through and figured out how they're making it. And I think that's true with pretty much everything, is that once you've done enough research and you figure out how people are doing these things, it does take a certain level of talent and skill and practice, but in the end, if you end up overcoming what they've done to then add your story on top of it, and it's half disappointing, but then you have the freedom of just kind of blowing the doors wide open.
Sure, and the thing is, to have fun playing music, you don't have to make the best record that was ever made. To enjoy making movies, we're never going to be Martin Scorsese. We don't have that kind of money and backing, but that doesn't mean that you can't enjoy the process and on a personal level get better, and
Absolutely.
at some point you can achieve even doing something greater than the people that you admire. And part of it is being okay with being average and below average at first, because again, I have no natural ability at anything, and I also love painting, and I have no artistic ability. But one winter I just decided it just was something that I felt like I really wanted to do. So I went and I didn't really want to spend a lot of money, so I bought red, blue, yellow, black, and white, which I knew
What can't you make from that?
you can make everything from
Right.
that. And I spent all winter every day painting, and I got better. I'm still not great, but I got better. But every time I do sit down to paint, I have fun, and that's the thing.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
it's not about the painting at the end as much as it is the act of painting.
Yeah.
And
A little comfy space that you find yourself in.
yeah, and you do get better as you practice.
I think the key too is not to get discouraged and to set small achievable goals,
Right.
little baby steps.
Yeah.
Because people that they're like, I wish I played guitar because I want to get signed and go on tour and be world famous.
It's like, hold on,
You're
wait
never
a
gonna
second.
pick up the
this
guitar.
you-
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe
Coming at this from the
one time
wrong
you'll pick up the
place.
guitar and then you'll put it down and say I'm not famous.
It takes a
didn't
lot of work.
It didn't work, yeah.
We were talking about my friend Esther, the violinist, and she teaches violin as well as a bunch of other instruments. But she said to me many times that she'd rather have a student with average talent that really works hard than someone who comes in naturally gifted. And a lot of times, if you are too gifted at first, you don't realize how much you have to work at it. And then when you get to that level where you have to work hard, it's not there. But the ones that have to work hard from the beginning, they're just constantly used to working hard, and they get that fire in their belly to constantly get better. And personally, I like that I'm not good at things when I begin, because there's all kinds of milestones to achieve, right?
How boring would this existence be if we were just truly excellent at everything?
Yeah.
Well, I'm a firm believer, even on things that I'm mediocre at to start with. I still think everybody should start at the bottom, no matter what they do.
Yeah.
I'm in medicine now, and not that I was, knowledgeable enough or skilled enough to start anywhere but the bottom, but I'm glad that I did, because now I can learn everything from the bottom up. And the same thing actually happened with music production and TV work. Was I started in a place really that it was the bottom of the ladder, and I'm grateful for that, because I have such an appreciation for the people at the bottom, because for me, I don't think anybody is any more important than anybody else.
Sure.
We all, in order for that project to be achieved, everybody has to contribute their share.
And as you move up the ladder, if you know what happens at the bottom, it only makes you that much stronger of a leader.
Yeah, exactly. The people at the bottom will respect you because you're one of them.
Yeah. We were on a film shoot once, and somebody introduced me as the director, and I said, first of all, I'm a receptionist at Wheeling Hospital. I'm not a director, other than occasionally when we do this, so let's not get too crazy with titles here.
Yeah.
And for me, it's It's not that hard to stay humble, to be honest, but it's still important to not let that to walk on there and think that, well, I don't have to carry a case in because you're just one of the people that are contributing, and it's good for me. Sometimes I am the guy that I hold the boom while someone else is directing, and that's okay because I'm learning by watching them.
Yes.
So I know when I talked to Richard, he said that, and you kind of maybe alluded to it, you played with Sugarland, and so you guys want to talk a little bit about your background before you came to Wheeling, and maybe some of the time in California? And
yeah, absolutely. You want me to go first?
Yes,
I'll go
please.
first. Okay, so I was born in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and I was there until really until I was 18, and I moved to Pittsburgh to go to the University of Pittsburgh because my dad was working in the Center for Clinical Pharmacology at the University of Pittsburgh. He actually took that job. He switched from Vanderbilt to Pitt when I was 11. So I started coming up here every summer. I moved here to go to college. I didn't like it. I loved Pittsburgh, but I was young. I was 18, and I didn't want to be there. So I left Pittsburgh, went back to Tennessee for about a year, and then moved to LA. We had a large group of friends that were heading out at that time. And it was a good time to kind of go and be around people that I knew in this huge city. So I went, and I ended up staying there for a cool decade and having a great time. So, I always did creative stuff while I was there. A lot of modeling, a lot of acting, a lot of all kinds of stuff. I actually worked at the Standard Hotel on Sunset Boulevard as a vitrine performer, which was one of my more interesting gigs. Basically, when you walk in to check in at the Standard, there's a desk that you check in at, but behind it is a giant glass tank that contains a human being, and you're able to just watch voyeuristically this human do whatever they want to do. I sat and transcribed recipes from my laptop, and actually got published in a book for it called California 24/7. So that was a cool job. And after that, ended up I was an assistant for a photographer. I worked in commercial real estate. I did a bunch of different things while I was in LA, but mostly I grew in.
You started painting in LA.
I did start painting in LA. I never had done that before, and it paid my rent several times. So grateful
really?
for that.
What kind of painting?
I like to do abstract oils, and I like to use a palette knife to get texture.
Oh yeah. And you were actually able to make a living from...
A little bit, yeah. I mean, there were a lot of months that I was like, oh no,
it's
my
like any
waitress
artist,
salary will cover.
Yep.
Desperation is inspiration, right? So
Yeah.
But it's as a painter, that's one of the hardest. I think for performance, one of the hardest things has to be a stand-up comedian. For an artist to make money, though, I think a painter is, because it is so that's really cool.
Well, I just found a lot of receptive people in LA, and I don't know, maybe there was a lot of disposable income, and there were a lot of art collectors, and I just happened to get lucky to be aligned with the right people at the right time. So yeah, there were several times that really paid my rent. I was an extra on Days of Our Lives.
That's cool.
For a couple of years. And that helped to pay my rent. I was always in the background at the hospital, gentlemen. So I may have never been a nurse, but I played one on TV.
You were a nurse.
So anyway, I did a bunch of creative stuff, and then met Nate. And then after we got married in 2010, we decided to, the next year, move back to Tennessee. And we did that, and then I had our first daughter while we were there, and he was going back to school. He actually played in the symphony when he went back to MTSU, and I can remember being 8 3/4 months pregnant with our oldest daughter, and we would go to the symphony performances, and she would get so excited by the sound of the bells and the harp and the strings that she would literally move my rib cage.
Goodness.
I could feel her just moving. So it was a great place for her to be born. Also kind of interesting that we had one daughter born in my hometown, and then one daughter born in his... Now, he was born in Charleston, but grew up in Wheeling.
Yeah.
So Lainey was born here, but...
That is kind of cool that you were in the hometowns. When,
it's pretty wild considering everywhere we've been. It's also kind of crazy. She was talking about living in Pittsburgh, and I guess that was 1998.
It was.
And I was in Pittsburgh Youth Symphony at that time. Plus, I would go up there, and I was a skater kid, and we'd go to Shady Skates.
Nice.
And I was there like every other weekend at least. So, I mean, she lived right there. So, like, we were so close to each other.
We
at
should
that
have
time.
met, but then When I left Pittsburgh, somehow we met in Los
In
Angeles
LA,
through friends of mine from Tennessee.
Yeah.
So the coincidences are pretty stacked in our favor.
Yeah. Maybe you're meant to be, but you probably crossed each other's paths a
right
The
couple
universe
times.
is like, oh no, you
Yeah.
don't. Hold on,
Yeah.
hold on. Let me rearrange some stuff and get you
Yeah.
guys.
You're not ready yet.
It's like big fish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, what they don't tell you is that when time starts again, it moves twice as fast
No,
to
no,
catch up with
he's
itself.
like the first time I was there, I was much too early.
Right, and the second time I
Yeah.
was much
Yeah.
Except in our case, it actually worked.
Perfect
the second
timing,
time.
That was a good movie.
Oh,
It's
it's
a great
amazing.
one.
I love
We talk
Ewan
about that one
McGregor.
a lot. Yeah.
So you made your way out to Los Angeles.
I did. Well, let's see. I guess I'll take it back a little.
Take it way back.
So yeah, born in Charleston, moved here when I was 1 to Wheeling. Started playing violin when I was 3. My mom had me painting pretty much around the same time, but I took violin more seriously than anything, and I, all the way through till I was about 15, I just knew that I was going to be a classical violinist professionally. Like that's just
So
what I
when
was gonna do.
we were talking about earlier, I didn't realize you were a violinist when I told you my story about hanging out with my friends that were classical
Yeah.
musicians.
No, that's awesome. Well, they were all a family of classical musicians, which, I mean, mine is too. I have 2 older brothers. Honestly, they're both more musically gifted than I am, by far. My oldest brother plays classical piano and French horn, and the middle brother is a singer-songwriter and has a degree in classical guitar, and they're both amazingly gifted, and just really, I mean, I'm so fortunate to grow up in the family that I had. They are intellectuals and creative folks, so I had the best of both worlds, definitely. But yeah, about the time, actually when I was 13, I guess, I switched to bass because I thought it was cooler.
The acoustic
Not
bass.
electric bass, mind you. Yeah, the
no,
giant upright acoustic.
I did switch to electric first.
Oh, you did?
I did.
There's the.
That's-
Do we still have it sitting over there? Is your giant upright?
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
in the corner.
yeah.
So I started playing electric bass in jazz band, and then from there I was like, well, I'm not gonna play violin anymore. I'm just gonna switch to upright bass, which I did that through. I did that till I was 18. Started getting into production. I'd been taking piano for a couple of years, but I got into production when I was about 16. I got my first software for beat looping, I guess.
Yeah.
What software was it back then?
That was called Mixmaster. It
Nice.
was basically like it was supposed to be like 2 turntable decks, and you could put like loops on each side. And my friends and I made some of the lewdest, most horrendous records in my brother's room, and I remember very well my mother storming up the steps and being like, "You boys cannot say that here." So that was my start.
Oh man.
Then in college, let's see, first year I was a classical musician. I ended up getting a shoulder injury and surgery, so that was, that took me off the classical path, which was that was a big trip up for me, since I figured I would just always be a classical musician,
Yeah.
and I couldn't do that anymore. So for a year, let's see, I came to WVU. That's when I had a roommate that was really into electronic music and mixing. So I ended up getting turntables in my first vinyl when I was at WVU, although I didn't do much else.
And as
but
a
after
result, did not
after a
return
year,
to WVU.
yeah, after a year in Morgantown, I was like, I can't stay here. So I ended up going to Berkeley in Boston, because I had taken an intro to electronic music course at Morgantown, just because it sounded cool. And it really was, you know, it was super advanced. There was no way that was intro. It was like programming like samplers and stuff. I was like, what is going on?
They're like, this is square one.
Yeah, they were like compose anyway. So I ended up going to Boston in '99, I think, or 2000, somewhere around there. And yeah, Berkeley was just unreal. I mean, still to think about it, it is the musician's utopia,
Yeah.
especially for electronic music and synthesis. But it was always, you know, I never wanted to be famous or anything. I just always wanted to make music and be creative.
Yeah.
Which is why I didn't really study big studio techniques and like learning how to like operate giant control boards or anything like that. I was always focused on what is the minimal amount I need to make music.
Yeah.
So it was basically like a keyboard, a laptop, and like a guitar or something.
Yeah.
Not a mic.
Mm-hmm.
So I just focused everything on that and graduated with a degree in music synthesis. And from there, I moved out to LA with a guy from Shadyside, Ohio, who I had grown up playing in bands in around here. But he had pretty much paved the way because he moved into a house with all his friends from college, which was in Tennessee.
Mm-hmm. Tennessee.
All of our
So
friends.
yeah, right.
Yeah, he was a friend of mine.
Oh, he's a
also,
friend of yours. Oh,
because
okay.
he was in my group of
So,
musical friends
yeah.
from Tennessee.
Oh,
So
okay.
it was a house full of these
Yeah.
Tennesseans that all had bands and just the best taste in like music and similar mind frames. You know, they had actually all moved out there together. It was kind of based around this band called Self,
Okay.
which is founded by our dear friend Matt Mahaffey, who is just the most ridiculous, incredible musician and producer.
But seriously, he really is.
Yeah.
He's and also kindest human being. Like,
Yeah,
just a great
just a
all-around
sweet
human.
dude. Very creative, very inspirational. And so these folks all moved out there. I think, how many people
I was
were?
one of those folks. Initially, I think there were like 19 of us.
Yeah, they
Wow.
all
Now,
moved
it took
across the
like a
country to
mass
LA
exodus
together.
from Murfreesboro to Studio City. We called the Valley in LA, Little Murfreesboro, for a little while.
Oh, that's great.
And so I was fortunate enough to move into a spot in this house with all these amazing, you know, musicians and creative folks. And I had I had a couple of roommates that are very influential. Beef Wellington,
The
Justin
legitimate
Meyer.
Beef Wellington.
Really?
Just
J-Dog.
you know, he's a drummer, but also a vinyl collector, and just I had left Boston, and I told my professor, I said I'm gonna go to LA and find DJ Shadow and live in his garbage can and figure out how he makes music. And my first real major disappointment in the entertainment industry was that my teacher said, well, he lives outside San Francisco, so that's not going to work. And I just kind of went, no. But I think it was even more fortunate that I had Justin as a roommate, because his taste, you know, just the deepest funk records and everything groove oriented, he would. So I had no knowledge of like vinyl and record collecting, and he wasn't so hip on like the production side. So when the two of us got together, he would just hand me records that he knew were fire, and I would flip the record, and we had a group. It's called Bitches Leave.
And I keep telling him our daughters are going to find these mixtapes and be like, Daddy.
It was from the RoboCop quote, all right?
Okay.
So we did that for a while. We had a really awesome band out there called The Legitimates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Legends are great.
And those guys were all great. A bunch of them were from Washington, PA, actually, out in LA. So that kind of set me on the right production path, and really developed the style that I have now. I mean, there were, of course, people from Berkeley. One of my best friends in Boston, Andre Lindell, ended up, I mean, he was always ridiculously gifted from the moment I met him. but he ended up producing Justin Bieber's "As Long as You Love Me,"
Oh, nice.
and Mateo Laborio, Abe Laborio Jr.'s son, was out there. There's a huge list of just ridiculously talented folks and now famous people that I went to school with out there. Also, Mac Burris was my other roommate. He's the music producer for Jimmy Kimmel Live right now, which I worked on that show for about 8 years, I guess.
Oh, what a great show to work on, too. I have to say, just from an outsider, I never worked on the show, but I got to reap all the benefits because I would come after I got off work and, come in with Nate and we'd watch the band set up and stuff and then, stay for these amazing live performances, and the interviews were great, and everybody that worked on that show was fantastic. Yeah. What a great show.
I mostly worked for that house band, Cleto and the Cletones.
Who are incredible. Again, just wonderful, exemplary human beings.
Oh my gosh.
The kindest, best, nicest, awesome.
And the musicianship that would come out of those guys daily was just unbelievable. I mean, they can play anything. And then, so I'd do that during the show, and then I'd set up for the guest band, whoever that would happen to be, and then get to watch them, which... I'm not often blown away by celebrities. Most of the time, honestly, I don't watch much TV, and I had no idea who the guests were.
Right.
People would be like, "Who was on the show?" And I'd tell them, and they'd be like, "Oh my gosh!" I have no idea.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is probably better, right?
Totally.
So that you're not starstruck with everybody that walks in.
I only had 2 or 3 moments actually as starstruck. I remember Mixmaster Mike meeting him. I have a picture, and I just look so stupid standing next to him. But
well, it's funny that you said that you went out there to meet DJ Shadow, but then you made friends with other people that helped you grow more. And it is funny that not everybody that's great gets famous. That sometimes it is that person that is this phenomenally talented person that they just haven't gotten their break yet, and maybe they never do get it, but that's actually the person that you want to meet, is the person that's got all the talent without the fame that you can actually work with and be friends with, and I'm sure DJ Shadow's awesome and would probably be a great guy, but he's also DJ Shadow, and so for you to be able to just be friends with regular, non-famous but super talented people, that's really better anyhow.
I'm sure Shadow meets 1,000 people like me daily, so it would be no big deal. But I mean, plus, I don't know, the roommates that I had it was the most Californian and awesome experience you can imagine.
It was incredible.
Plus, our other friend, Moon Eagle, my other roommate, he and Amber were best friends, so that's basically how Amber and I started dating.
Because I'd known Nate for about 5 years, but honestly, I don't think we'd ever had a conversation. Because Nate
I was known as either Quiet Nate or Little Nate.
Well, I called him Little Nate because he was like the sweetest person. Like, he was always there, but he was never extremely assertive or extremely vocal. So my friend Moon brought him over, and I'm a big dart player. I love to play darts, and so they would come over for dart nights, or we would all grill out and hang out, and I finally started talking to Nate, and I was like, Nate may be the coolest person I've ever talked to. We should talk more. So we started talking more and more, and then after 5 years we started dating, and after 6 months we moved in together, and after 3 years we got married, and and here we are now, just starting our musical voyage together. So who knows what we'll be doing 5 years from now.
Well, I think that shows that with you guys, everything is, when the time is right, it happens. And
absolutely. We're open to whatever. It's just everything.
Including, waiting till you get to your hometown to have one baby. It is, you guys seem to fall into perfect timing, and sometimes it is, at the right time is when conditions are right. Then, had you maybe tried to start playing music when you were in Los Angeles, maybe it wouldn't have worked out as good as it did when you did now.
Absolutely.
Well, a big part of our philosophy is, if you want something, you have to open yourself up to the universe about it, and a large part of that is kind of being at the whim of the universe there.
Yeah.
Right? Trust, just being vulnerable.
Yeah.
Well, you know what's funny is I go to the Unitarian Church, and they had a service on, being open to the universe, and I thought it was a bunch of hooey. But the lady, the minister Rini, that was saying, I respected what she had to say, so I'm like, all right, I'm going to give this a shot. And for years off and on, I said, well, I'd kind of like to maybe try to make a movie or something. And so I just really just at that service said, all right, if you got something to tell me, universe, now's the time to do it, or forever hold your peace. And the next week, I'm sitting there at the service, and I got this idea for a movie that it wasn't even an idea for a movie. It was, I'd written a paper on perception that someone said that they wanted to discuss with me, and I thought, man, I could explain it better if I made this little film. And this whole idea was running through my head, and then I went home and I spent all afternoon writing out, which it's never been made because it's a science fiction movie, but I spent hours working, and that's when I went from saying, oh, I'd like to make a movie, that I'm going to make a movie, and from then on, I would take my 2 of the days that I had off every week, and I'd go to the coffee shop in St. Clairsville and work on the script. Yes. And I approached it like it was a job, that 8 hours a day, 2 days a week. Yes. I committed myself to making a movie, and one way or the other, I was going to make a film, and so it did. The universe did speak to me, and so I became a believer after that. And it really is, you have to open yourself up to what it is that you're supposed to be doing,
and then let it come to you.
Yeah, Amber always says you got to put it out there.
You do.
You
do.
Back,
It's true, and it's so funny that your first script was about perception. If I could identify myself in one word to give someone kind of a view of how I see the world, I've always identified myself as a perceptionalist. Yeah. Which is funny because I didn't know of the perceptionalists until much later in life, and then started to listen to their music, and that was kind of another wormhole. But really, the way you see something, and the way if you are able to take your mindset and just stay calm in any weather, and just stay open, I think that's the best way to receive life.
Wait, are you talking about the Perceptionist from Boston?
Mm-hmm.
The MC duo?
Kind of. I was.
Were you? I wanted to give a shout out to them.
Really fast.
That was awesome.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. I'm going to pause anyhow because it's good.
That's true.
And
Brewkeepers.
Yeah.
Yeah, they make great local beers, man. It's awesome.
And Hightower, do they brew beer?
Hightower, yeah.
I haven't visited out there yet, but I'm very interested to.
It was a little hard to find the first time I went out there because I went the wrong way, but it's cool. It's just and the people are super nice. In fact, I had mentioned to them coming on the podcast, but I haven't had a chance to make it happen. The list of guests. Definitely outpace the amount of time that I have to do podcasts, especially in the summer. But
it's a good problem to have and a good tribute to the Valley.
Yeah, it really is. There's no shortage of interesting people. Heck, I've not even had a chance to have Tim Thompson and P.D. Gregg from Towngate on, and I've been wanting to have them on forever. But between them being busy and me being busy, and the list goes on and on and on of interesting people. So when we left off, we were talking about perception.
Yeah.
And I really do think that, you said that you guys are really about positivity, and that really has a lot to do with perception and how you perceive your life and the events of what's going on. And I noticed I just got a new motorcycle. I treated myself, and I noticed that it's already got 5,000 miles, and I bought it in May.
Oh, my.
And I'm thinking,
moly.
I put a lot of miles on this, but then I thought, well, I bought it to ride it, and how awesome it is that it's not even the end of August, and I've had a chance to ride that much.
That's awesome.
And it is my number one favorite thing to do. So in addition to everything else I've been able to accomplish that I wanted to do, it's been a pretty productive summer. I got to have these great experiences riding this motorcycle, and it was just hit me today how lucky I've been all summer that I've got to have this much time riding, and it wasn't there was a little bit stressful this morning. I was working on a project. It was so hot and sweaty outside, and I just wanted to get done, and But the thing that I took away from the day the most was that I had a good motorcycle ride, and then I had a good dinner and a great conversation with you guys.
Us too.
And I could focus on how hot and sweaty and sticky it was, but
No, but you're coming off the best summer ever
Yeah.
into a good dinner and a nice
Yeah.
day. Like, yeah,
And-
I like the way you look at the world. It's
you
good.
have to. I think. Well, you don't have to, but it's definitely benefits you if. And, I always say that you can find $1 on the sidewalk and also stub your toe both in the same day. And it's when you run into somebody later on in the day.
What are you gonna?
What are you
tell
going to
them?
say? You going to focus on the fact that
know
you
what?
stubbed your toe, or the fact that you found
It's
$1?
a really nice twist on the glass is half full, the glass is half empty.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's good.
Because it is. What are you gonna share? What are you gonna spread?
Your perception is really everything. If you try to say, if something was a loss, you think, well, then that made room for something else. That helps you move forward. And I think the fact that you guys are so positive is why you had these great experiences meeting
Yeah.
positive people. That it's not an accident that you ended up in a house with these great musicians that were all positive and talented. And I do think that what you put out definitely is what you get back. And
I think the key to the entire thing, because honestly, Amber and I, pretty often talk about things like enlightenment.
yeah,
Absolutely.
And I think the first step for that is being thankful.
yeah,
And that's not thankful for, I'm about to eat this amazing $25 steak. Thanks.
Yeah.
It's more like I was embarrassed today. I learned what my limits were in this aspect today, and I'm thankful for that.
yeah.
Being
Right.
thankful for the negativity and learning that you are stronger than you think. That's the beginning of
And
it.
and always reminding yourself what you did well. Never. I don't know. Just not letting negativity take from you the taste of your day, the flavor of everything that you've actually been in, and everything you've participated in.
Well, I like to think that there's, like they say, all right, I'm going to quote Kung Fu Panda.
Let's do this. It's one of our favorites. If you
there is
never-
no good news or bad news. There is only news.
Yeah, yeah.
That's true.
You know?
And if you never try something, you've what is it? If you never try something you haven't done, you'll never be more than you are.
Yeah.
Or the only failure is quitting. That's pretty
That's a good
simple.
one.
Yeah, one of the guys that told me when I started the fire department, he said that the people that don't show up, they don't make any mistakes. But if you're making a mistake, that means you showed up, and especially something like firefighting, where it's dangerous and complicated. That you, no matter how much you don't know anything.
Sure.
And I think that comes just about everything I do. I'm nowhere near an expert in anything, and Scott Anderson, the guy that he's building a chopper for me, and he's like this amazing fabricator mechanic that's such the next level that I can't even imagine. And he watches YouTube videos to learn stuff all the time. He's constantly learning something new, and that's why he's so good, because he's been doing that for a long time. And the fact that someone that's that far advanced, that they're still realizing
Yeah.
that they have a lot to learn, and I'm okay with being a novice at things, and I like seeing my own personal development. And
Well, I would like to rectify that and say that you were a very professional interviewer.
You're fantastic at
Yeah.
this.
Well,
I can't believe-
Honestly, like
I can't believe we're only number
This-
67.
this
honestly.
this might be the most Amber has ever heard me speak.
In one straight go, maybe. You should
Yeah.
come over more often. Just like set us
Yeah,
up.
yeah.
I'd be
That's
well.
You should be a counselor. Or something.
You guys are great to hang out with.
Oh,
Well, you know what's
thank
funny
you.
is I'm usually the guy that talks over the conversation, and so all these different things that I do, I gained so much by doing them. So it's forced me to be a listener, because people don't tune into the podcast to listen to me. They tune in to listen to the
no.
guest. Well, I always say, if you listen to one podcast, when you walk away from that, you should go, wow, I really enjoyed that guest. If you listen to 10 of them, then you go, well, I really like James.
Oh,
But
yeah.
each individual podcast, what you should like the most about that podcast is the guest. And so I've had to learn to, I have a thought on the tip of my tongue that I don't have to necessarily say it,
Mm-hmm.
unless there's a a lull in the conversation, because I could talk for the whole 2 hours myself, but that's not what I don't get anything from that. So
You'd make an excellent jazz musician.
fit in where you can get in. Right? Well, as a drummer, one of the things that it's real tempting to want to play these like great fills and be fancy all the way throughout, but the best drummers are the ones that kind of just hold a steady beat, and when you get a little opening there, you can throw in a little finesse, and then you got to back down, and that's always been a struggle for me to not overdo it.
I think that's I think that's, if not the biggest problem for musicians, it's up there.
Well, it's the art of ensemble, right?
Because you work
It's
so hard at playing
blending.
your instrument that you want to show people what you can do.
But sometimes showing people what you can do, showing people that you know how to be quiet, how to blend in.
A lot of music is silence, you know? And if you can put the silences in the right place, then
that's true.
you're golden.
And you have to do what services the song or the group,
moment,
in
the
moment.
vibe.
Yeah,
That was
Slave to
definitely
the vibe,
that was
Yeah.
definitely a
right?
big part of me getting into producing. Was I was just filling tracks with filling songs with as many tracks as I could put on there.
yeah.
At every time, I mean, just the most complex stuff, to the point where you couldn't like even distinguish melodies from each other.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
You know what I
it's
mean?
too much.
So you just stuff it full, and that's certainly not enjoyable for most people.
And you have to kind of step over too far then to know when to dial it back. I know I did a movie called The Separator, and I went through and I watched every minute of footage that we had, and I made notes of all the great reaction shots, and I saved everything, and everything to me was precious, and so I would splice different takes to get the best of everything, and it took forever. And I realized later that I should have taken the one good take that had the most of the things I liked. And
You feel like?
yeah, well, as far as
Do you feel like it was a bit too compartmentalized, maybe, when you were
Artificial?
yeah,
shopping and kind of picking the best stuff?
I think that there was a story I heard. It was a Bruce Willis movie, I think, where they did this big train wreck scene, and it was 5 days and several $1 million to shoot it, and it turned out perfect. And when they put it in the movie, they realized that it messed up the pacing, and there was nothing wrong with the shot. It just didn't fit with the movie, so they had to cut it out. And that's really important to know what to leave out, and so that knowing that, well, yeah, I could do this, but then it's too much. And even I redid a motorcycle once, and it was black with little splashes of red, and it was real tempting. Oh, I can make that red, and I can make that red, and then I stood back, and I'm like, okay, there is a certain amount of accent color that's too much, and there's knowing when to stop.
Dominant.
Yeah. And that actually was something that I was thinking about earlier today. When you ride a motorcycle, you get a chance to really muse on things like, is that I really love design, and one of the things that's helped me with when it comes to motorcycles and cars, to the extent that I'm a designer, is that I've looked at a million pictures of motorcycles and cars and custom this and that, and I saved the pictures of the really awful ones. The ones where someone tried really hard, but they didn't quite nail it. Because I studied, like,
what's the difference between this
Yeah.
and something I truly love?
yeah,
Like
why
a
is
classic?
what's wrong with
get
this?
that. I
What
get
what they
that.
do wrong, that because they put a picture of it online because they really liked it, and I appreciate that they worked really hard at it, but something about it's off. So I learn more from their mistakes, because if I made my own mistakes, it'd take too long, be too expensive. But to be able to really, and not to be overly critical of other people's work, but to, when I watch a movie, if I see something that I really like or I don't like, you can really learn from that process, and without being overly negative, but just perception of.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it grows your perception, and it grows your ability to spin things positively, maybe, because even if you see something that you don't like, I mean, again, that person has put forth the effort, and they're doing you a huge service,
Yeah.
But
because you just noticed something that you don't necessarily
You also
like.
have to keep in mind that somewhere out there's some kid or whatever that has only seen a couple designs, and he's like, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen. It's perfect.
Well,
You know
So
what I
it's
mean?
dangerous because maybe that's there.
Well, and the thing is that it really is, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So,
Yeah.
and I try to, as I get older, the more I realize that I don't say that something's not good. I just say that I don't like it or it's not for me.
Yeah.
Because that's
'Cause-
all. Yeah, that's it.
Because
right?
it might be that I think it looks janky,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean that the rest of the world. And in fact, a lot of the times I'll see a motorcycle that's a very, it's $100,000 show bike, and I hate it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
obviously people love it. There's actually a truck up on the big stand at Whitesides in St. Clairsville, this big white 4-wheel drive truck with all these weird angular accessories.
Yeah.
And obviously a team of designers approved that, and they put it up on the lift so the people at the dealership think it's pretty cool, and I'm sure a lot of people will buy it, but I don't like it.
Right.
And I every time I drive by it, I look at it, I'm like, why don't I like it? Because it's important to me to not just say I don't like the way it looks, but to figure out what it is why it doesn't appeal to me,
Exactly.
so that I can. It's part of a learning process, and I think that is.
Well,
In that way, those people at the dealership have done their job because
Another good example.
Yeah, right.
You know?
Yeah.
you look behind us, we have a collection. I think we're about at 4,000 records now.
Yeah, I
just
should point
about.
out it's a wall made out of records.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And
legit.
we've had to move this 3 times now, so it is very legit.
You don't need to
I
go
will
to a
s-
gym.
I just
I will
kind of
say-
want to reach back. I'm going to grab a random one and
Grab
see what
a
we
record.
get. We'll see.
I will say there is a lot of crap on these walls, according
I'm going to
to
grab another record.
pretty much anybody.
Yeah.
A lot of these are dollar bin buyouts that I did.
Yeah.
Oh, here we
You know,
go.
flat price, give me all your dollar records.
Odetta
Odetta?
sings ballads and the
Oh,
blues.
here's
That's a
the,
pretty
the
good one,
Boston
actually.
Pops. Actually, this is another
Nice.
good one. Oh, Sousa marches.
Oh,
Never
oh
know
yeah,
what's
John
gonna-
Philip Sousa, yeah. Show and ag.
Show and ag. I don't know who Show and
they
ag
look
are,
like,
but we ought to put these on the
yeah.
turntable and see what we get.
But to speak to perception in your motorcycle analogy,
Full scale.
it's my firm belief that there is no such thing as a bad sample.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's just finding the right song and time and place and fit for it.
Yeah.
So any of these records, any of these pieces of crap, here, I'll pick another one up.
Right,
That
let's
I'll-
just
that I'll
say this
bet-
is the most
that I'll
fun
bet
is just
sucks.
to grab we come
I'll
down
bet-
here, we're not sure where to start, you just grab a record.
Oh, this is
out
a
of
white
the
label.
Thousands.
Oh, Toxic Twins. It's okay.
I'll house you.
Yeah, this is some definite like raver.
So you
Warehouse
do that,
CD.
you'll grab a label or
Occasionally. I
an
mean,
album.
we should probably do it more, honestly. I mean,
Yeah.
we're
We
surrounded by
haven't-
God only knows
we-
what.
Oh, what's it? See, man.
Or here's
History, America's Greatest Hits, produced by George Martin. Actually.
Ebony Foster.
Let's see.
Ebony Foster, Crazy for You, from the
75.
First Lady of Hendrix.
But anyway, so the point being, you know, Sousa, Odetta, like all these, it's especially like, you know, I love like the tradition of sample-based hip-hop music.
Yeah.
Of it's so West Virginian, it's ridiculous. Like, you know, in New York, these people took a sampler instrument, drum machine,
Yes.
that had, you know, really no purpose of these kids getting a hold of it and sampling records into it. And, you know, that's what they ended up basically hacking these pieces of gear and turned it into, you know, the most popular genre in the world.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Um,
It really
and
is.
and just some of the samples that they would pick, you know, and of course James Brown, every song he's ever done has been popularized, but there's so many records out there that just you would have never heard of, and they're now repopularized,
Mhm.
or you have no idea what they were, and you're never going to find out.
Paul's Boutique was one of those albums that how many obscure
Yeah.
records
Oh,
did they
man.
pull from for that record? And
Yeah.
And what a genius, beautiful collection of sounds
Oh,
that
man,
is.
that's
My God.
Well, if you've ever, I learned to scratch because I watched the documentary Scratch about.
Which is a great one.
About 5,000 times, probably. That's really what drove me. You know, that I was, like I said, a consumer of turntable albums and scratching, and I was like, how in the world are they doing this? Because I was a classical musician, like violinist for like 20 years, and I should know how these untrained kids are pulling this stuff off, and I'm just like, oh, what are they doing?
Yeah.
So I studied that, because then I, like I said, put in the research time, and then eventually I was able to add my own creative side to it and kind of make it my own. But it's such an evolution, all the sample based and vinyl based. I mean,
Yeah.
but I'm very thankful for all their pioneering work.
Well, and you had a respect for the work, and then you also had a curiosity, and you took it the step farther to really educate yourself, and then to try to do it yourself. And I think that's what makes the difference, is that to actually take that step and go, okay, I respect this, and I'd kind of like to do it, so I'm going to figure out how to do it, and then taking the step and starting out. And I'm sure the first time you got that,
It sounded a lot.
that's all right.
It sounded a lot like the first time I played violin, actually.
Right, but eventually you dial it in, and I know you were showing me the setup you have now, and all the buttons, and it's, I'm sure someone just walking up to that equipment to learn how to use it would be daunting. I mean, there's a lot
it's
to
very
learn there.
Intimidating. Well, a good analogy. So I eventually did learn how to use all those very large audio control boards, mixers. And people, the most common question when somebody sees a picture of a mixer is, how do you learn what all those knobs and buttons do?
Yeah.
But then you tell them that it's this row.
Yeah.
Learn this one row, because all the rows are the exact same after
Yeah.
that. So there's maybe 10 knobs and one fader and 2 buttons in that whole row.
Yeah.
That's what's like 15 things to learn.
Yeah.
And they're all pretty similar and self-explanatory. And once you get that, then you know every row on that board.
Yeah.
And it's breaking things down into their most complex, most simple form first.
And training your ear, right?
Yeah.
But-
That comes with it. But it's all the experiment, It's, even if somebody didn't tell you, or that knob wasn't labeled, when you turn it, what
You can hear.
what do you experience?
Yeah.
That was a big part of learning all the production techniques, because software engineering and personal home studios, that was pretty new in '96 when I got my
Sure.
first software. And people were coming out with plugins and things like that. I had no idea what any of that plugin stuff meant. You know what I mean? Like I got my first limiter, and I was like, just turn these knobs till it sounds good.
Right. Yeah.
And I think you had mentioned this earlier. Everything comes down to, you don't need to know if you like something. You just need to know if you don't like it.
If you don't like it. Yeah.
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 So you turn a knob and you're like, oh, it sounds good. Or you turn a knob and you're like, I'm not using that.
Yeah. And because there's always, well, like you said, you can grab a record and you don't automatically say there's nothing good on here, and you don't know until you listen to it that what you can find on there that you will like. Now, when you listen to it, you might go, nah.
Yeah.
But there's always that possibility that when something does come up, you go, oh, I like that.
And even the crazier dimension is that you can pull out a record today and put it on and say, there's nothing on here good. And you can do the same thing the next day, and you have a beat or something running, and you're like, holy crap, that's perfect.
The right time and place for it to all happen. And what I like about the idea that you can pull out a record and kind of mine for that little nugget of gold out of there is that you see the potential in all those records, and to you they're not just crappy records that maybe nobody else would like.
None of this is wasted time. All of this is human beings being creative. Right. None of this is human beings being destructive. This is completely worthwhile.
It sometimes feels like hoarding, but but I can't get rid of these records.
It could be considered hoarding, or it could be considering preserving.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's true.
That's what I say when
That's
I get
true.
another old motorcycle and put
Yeah.
it in the ground.
Yeah.
Although if you use it, it's not really preserving it, but
And
No,
it's,
but
but
if
it's
you're
also not
keeping it
hoarding
up.
either.
yeah, it's better than it sitting somewhere.
And using it for its purpose has something to be said for
Yeah.
it by riding it.
Well, and you
using
made
it.
you made a really good point, that all represents somebody's hard work, and whether it necessarily caught on with the public or if it became a well-known masterpiece, or even if it's in the common thought of being extraordinary, it's still someone put their heart and soul into doing something, and that's what that represents. And I always remind people, because there's a few people I know that are a little bit haters when they go to see a band,
That's okay.
and I want to remind them that even a band that's not that good, the amount of work that it takes to be in an average band is incredible. To just lucky enough to meet people that are willing to get together often enough, that have the same taste and schedule and everything, to write 10 songs, original music, and then have the courage to go out and play them in front of
Yeah.
people. And even if they do it poorly,
Mm-hmm.
that's a lot of work, and that takes a lot of effort and courage, and just to learn the music, the instruments, and to buy the equipment. So cut them some slack, because
they
uh,
could have
they
been. They
tried
could have
it.
been doing nothing.
They could have been- yeah.
Let me see you do better.
Yeah,
If you
that-
think you can do
Right?
better, go do better.
Please, immediately.
if you have if you're somebody that's on one of those albums there, you worked very hard to get to that point.
You did.
Yeah, unless you walked into a studio and plunked down some money and they let you record one, which I don't know that doesn't happen very not since Elvis.
Yeah, this is
Yeah,
vinyl here.
That's
This isn't no
vinyl.
studio basement.
Yeah, right. So yeah, someone had to actually appreciate it enough to press it and sell it.
Yeah.
And,
absolutely.
Oh, that's such a craft.
And
Yeah.
that does bring up an interesting point as far as the way technology has made it easier for people to produce movies and music and other artistic things
Sure.
in their home that used to be that you had to have. Even podcasting has, you don't need a radio station with a transmitter to do a show like this.
Yes.
And
Isn't it great?
Well,
Isn't it
this-
amazing?
yeah.
Well, think about what could happen if this happened in the social class in America.
yeah,
Okay, so we had Hollywood, who was Hollywood, and that was what you had to go there, and you had to be there, and you had to do
you have to be accepted.
whatever was
yeah.
done because they had the equipment.
Yeah.
Now we've delineated that. We've given the equipment to everyone. Everyone can have a movie studio. And
Right.
imagine if we could do that with the social classes, and the middle class could somehow just be absorbed, and we could all be given the same. What I'm saying is, it was a huge revolution, an
Yeah.
artistic revolution in America, and I think it's amazing. I think it's fantastic.
But it is the double-edged sword.
where now
Because
you
we
have
have
every
so
single person
much
putting out stuff.
content.
We do have a
which
lot of
I love.
content, but
Yeah.
But to sort through it all is an impossible task.
Wow.
It's that is the kind of
Yeah.
that you have to, because everybody can easily make a record in their basement. They do. Not everybody puts the time and intention into it that you guys do. And so it is, for me, it's quite a conundrum, because on one hand I respect the fact that they took the time to make anything, and and instead of doing nothing, and that they had the courage to put it out in the public. On the other hand, it makes it hard as a consumer of interesting things to, I mean, I love podcasting, and I've recently went through and put a bunch of different podcasts on my main board there, because I want to try them out. And quite honestly, some of them I'm like,
Yeah.
not for me, and maybe they weren't as well put together as what I'm used to listening to, and so it makes it harder. I find it hard to find new music, just because there's so much to choose from that I get
Sure,
overwhelmed with
yeah.
the choices. But overall, I think it is great, and I think that what's really cool is with the whole DIY movement is people also have a different attitude towards success. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of people that make their living with a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
They don't need NBC, and they don't need to be as big as Big Bang Theory, and they don't have to make $100 million. If you can make $40,000 or whatever it is, a comfortable income on with a YouTube channel, and that's great.
And I mean, you're having to do active research. You're staying on top of your field,
Yeah.
and you're delivering that news and
But-
giving it to people. So
But you're also touching on a much larger problem, actually. And I don't have too much say or opinion in, because I'm not in this to make money or a living. I quit playing violin for a while because that's what I had to do for so long, and I didn't want to have to do it anymore.
Yeah.
So I just stopped for years. And then I picked it up eventually, and playing instruments now just for myself is the greatest gift that my parents and myself can give to me.
Yeah. It's different though when it's not your job, right?
Oh my gosh. If I had to play violin, I wouldn't have lasted very long as a classical musician.
Yeah. My friend Ben's a potter, and they don't live around here now, but he worked at a restaurant. He was a waiter and a manager, and he said, I like working in a restaurant because then I can make whatever pottery I want, and I don't have to worry that if I make a plate that everybody loves, that now I got to make 100 of them
Right.
to pay the rent. If I make that one, if I don't want
Right.
to make any more of them, I don't worry. I make the pottery that I like, and if it sells, it sells, and if it doesn't, I'm not going to starve.
And that literally is the essence of Love and Data, because
Yeah.
we don't it was never supposed to be anything more than us
Yeah.
making music together. And so whatever happens with it.
If you had to worry about whether you're going to be able to feed your kids
No, it's
because of the
yeah,
band, then it
we're
would be
already-
so.
That-
Oh,
That's a big part of
that
why
wouldn't
I'm
work.
a PA, because I made a decent living as an entertainer and in the entertainment industry, but as a PA now, all of this is just because we love to do it.
Yeah.
And hopefully being a PA, will afford us studio improvements throughout the
Sure.
years, and
We'll see about all of that, but honestly, that was it right there. It took the pressure off our creative
Yeah.
lives, and so it's able to blossom so much more, just
Yeah.
because the pressure is not there.
I agree. The podcast is monetized and never made any money from making movies, and I like it that way.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to have to make, not anything against anybody that does this, but I wouldn't want to have to take on film jobs that I didn't really enjoy, doing weddings or TV commercials or something
Sure.
like that,
Yeah.
just because I think,
To do
yeah,
for-
yeah, it wouldn't be fun. And I think even if I monetized the podcast to the point where that was my sole income, then all of a sudden it's stressful and I got to book this guest and I hope people like it. And what if the downloads go down, and that would take the fun out of it. And there's a saying that if you do what you love for a living, you never have to work a day in your life.
Right.
But I kind of see that as you also run the risk of taking the thing that you love and turning it into a job.
into work.
Sure.
I was thinking that exactly.
And so
be
I
careful.
I'm really hesitant to take any of these things that I really enjoy doing. And
No, I can tell you truthfully, as having to play music for a living and produce, engineer for a living, that definitely becomes the thing. And I have many friends that are, write music for TV shows, things like that, and they're pretty miserable
No,
when they
we
have
also
to make
have a lot
music.
of friends that do it and who cut from that cloth. There
Yeah.
are people who are absolutely we have friends who score for cartoons and friends who write for TV shows and who write for commercials, and they're amazing. They can literally be dropped into almost any situation, given a sketch and given some idea of what needs to happen, and
Yeah.
arrange something beautiful in between. But
Yeah,
that
they're-
too is a gift. There are some creatives who
They're
can
very
make it their
professional
living.
about it, but they are not passionate about it anymore.
yeah,
It's copy paste type,
yeah, it becomes well. And I think that you can have because people are so different that for some people they can find that thing that they love, and it's not like working, and but then for other people like us that maybe we're not built that way, that monetizing it and the stress of having to do it does take a certain element out of it.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
There are literally two people that I know that are able to do that and who are able to handle the stress
Yeah.
of that type of a job, but they excel at it.
Yeah.
There's something to them, they need that catalyst of pressure. It really works for
Yeah.
them. But for the rest of us, I really do feel like creative space, I feel like the process stays pure when you keep it separate from your bread and your butter. Like literally having to feed your family. That can be a drain.
Especially when I think if your creative outlet is something where you really want to do something unique and without boundaries.
A little different.
And
without boundaries.
Yeah.
You're right.
And
You're right.
that brings it back to the whole DIY, computer-based home studio type situation. That for places like Wheeling, West Virginia, you really couldn't ask for more. The day I found out that you can produce music from your house. Actually, I guess what year did OK Computer come out? That was about 96.
97, 96?
97.
Great.
So,
Let's stop for a second and
just
yeah.
let's take a moment of
that's one of my
silence for
favorite
OK
albums
Computer.
of all time.
I have this
Deservedly
debate with
so.
people all the time because people are kind of divided on Radiohead, and that's fine. Like I'm not a giant
How dare
fan of
they?
Radiohead. Honestly, I'm not a giant fan of Radiohead.
Oh, okay.
But that album, my brother told me. I think I listened to it a couple times, and he was like, they produced this in the drummer's bedroom, basically. And from that point on, I was like, oh my gosh.
There are no limits.
That was your epiphany moment, right?
It pretty much was.
Wow.
By then, I had made a couple records with local bands here. Shout out to Dave Klug Brothers, Dallas Campbell, Mikey Eifrate, Sean Decker, Clint Sutton, Jeff Hoskinson. All those guys. Like we were talking about before, whatever we had to make a product, we would do whatever it took to make a record.
Yeah.
And a couple times we went to the studio, and that just felt so artificial.
Yeah.
You're paying for time to be there and hurry up and do this instead of we have this thing that will record us right here. Like we have all the time we want with it.
Yeah, because it's the one time, the first time that I went into studio, I remember they put some kind of compressor on my toms, and they were like, dong, dong. It sounded like an electronic drum kit.
Like
There was nothing rock
string
about it.
sound.
And this guy who we were paying, that we never met,
Right.
completely shaped the sound of what we were recording.
Yeah.
It sounded nothing like us. He was going to get a clear recording of the music.
Yeah.
He wasn't trying to get an accurate representation of what the band sounded like.
Yeah.
And to this day, I listen to it and I go, well, you can hear all the instruments clearly, but it's awful.
But it
Yeah.
sounds nothing
yeah.
like
Well,
us.
And that's a good point. I mean, now the computers aren't a tool. Now they're an instrument.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? People are like a big part of hopefully my legacy as a musician is that no matter where I've gone since I've been getting into recording, wherever I go, I inspire people to make their own home studios.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I definitely recognize what it is to be a musician, but that's very limiting in a lot of ways to be restricted to just your instrument. And if your point is to be able to put out music for people to listen to, then I think you should record yourself and make the recording, as much about your music as the instrument.
You guys should meet Alvin Chu. He's a good friend of mine. He was on the podcast 3 or 4 episodes back. And same thing, he has a studio and he does this really great ambient music. He has a little Asian flair to it. And he was a hip hop artist before that. He worked on an animated TV show up in Canada, and he lives here in the Valley, and he has his own studio, and he labors.
How do we not know this person?
Yeah, we're-
Yeah, you'll
Sounds
have
like
to.
a total kindred spirit.
His music title is The Mellowed Yellow, and
Okay.
he is literally. You probably haven't
Well,
heard.
right now.
Yeah, you probably haven't heard of him because he is one of the most mellow people. He's
Oh, I
also
love
an
it.
incredible artist and painter. He's like, it would be the third member of your family, and he's also quiet like you,
Right.
but super nice,
Nice.
super thoughtful. Yeah, we'll have to get together sometime. You'll
Yeah.
and I like talking to Alvin because he can really speak well to the life of an artist the way you guys do. He put some thought into what it means to be an artist,
Yeah.
and he really is one of those people that really lives the life of an artist for his
An
art.
artist. You know,
Awesome.
that was the first piece of advice that I ever got about being a creative human being professionally. Is
Accept
I
it.
was about to start to try that, and
Yeah.
I had a friend who said, "Now listen to me, Amber. If you want to be an artist, you have to live an artist life. You have to wake up in the morning and you have to paint, you have to practice, you have to work your craft. Like, this has to be your life." And it's so funny that I gave up ever wanting to be an artist professionally, and now I feel more now like I live an artist life
Yeah.
than I have ever in my life.
Yeah, because sometimes I think we go through the motions of being an artist, and we
Sure.
do these things that we think make us an artist, but they're
It's an imitation of someone else's experience.
yeah, it's
you
what
know?
we think it means to be instead of actually living that moment. And you know, I think that, you know, when I see a really cool bike or car or whatever, I don't have to force myself to ask why I like it or to take a picture of it or to study it or anything.
Sure.
It
You
just
just like it.
It's a
I
reaction.
I have to. Yeah,
You
I'm
feel
gonna.
it.
I've many times looped around the back and I just gaze at it for a minute, take a picture because I can't quite put my finger on it, but I really like that something about it, and then I'll go back and
You study and you pick out the pieces that make that special to you.
Yeah.
You know.
and I think when it's really in your heart, then you don't have to force yourself to do it. You know, some of the harder parts like hauling the equipment and things like that, you kind of have to force yourself to do, but actually just taking the time to do it, or for your brain, your attention to go there, it's almost impossible for it to not go there.
Yes.
You know, then
Yeah.
and so you just
Well, one of my favorite musical quotes is that, and this is opposite of how I thought for a long time. It's not how long you practice; it's how many times you pick up the instrument.
yeah.
Mhm.
Because after about 10 minutes, it doesn't matter how long you practice.
Yeah.
You know, those first few minutes of the inspiration that forced you to go get the instrument out in the first place is what really drives you and causes you to learn.
That's what we keep hitting on during this entire 2-hour conversation we've all been having. It's about that thing, that
Be proactive.
feeling, that but
Yeah.
that the drive behind the proactivity, the what is that?
The
Yeah.
The
overcoming
want,
from
I guess.
yeah, the overcoming from interest to the need to be able to do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's really a need. Like it's a,
it is. It
Yeah.
has to be an
It-
intrinsic need.
Yeah.
that
And
like hunger that they speak of.
Yeah.
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 I definitely didn't need to start. I've got a bunch of other projects. I didn't really need to pull these old motorcycle helmets off the wall and repaint them, but I just
But-
I was running late today because I had one out drying out in the sun, and I brought it in and I started to lay out some pinstripe, and I'm like, all right, you don't, you know,
We gotta-
stop.
yeah, we gotta
I'm
go.
like, one more. I'm
Yeah,
gonna do-
yeah.
I'm like, I see it now. I'm afraid if when I get home, I won't see where it's supposed to go. And then I'm like, well, I got half of it done. So I just, and that's the funny part. The doing the one side of it is creative. The other side is just work because you have to mimic the other side.
Yeah,
So
no, yeah, that's true. That's true.
It's not.
Symmetry,
It's
right?
not as fun. It's
Making the
it's
symmetry.
the whole creative. Oh well, this is where this is going to go. And then the other side is more like, oh, it's harder.
Now I've got to match
Yeah,
it.
now I got to match it, and it's more of a chore. But you do that because you have to sometimes. It's not.
Yeah.
It may not always be
No, no.
the height
That
of
to
fun.
me is creating a song and then playing it live.
Yeah.
You create this song and it's free form and it's awesome and it's all free flowing and
Yeah.
you get this one sound that you love and then you've got to recreate it live. So then
Yeah.
there's the other balance of the symmetry and it's difficult.
Yeah.
But in that, if there's not discomfort, you're not growing. You're
Yeah.
not actually expanding yourself or your mind. So if you can bring yourself to the same level of passion about doing what you have to do as you have about doing what you want to do, then that's, I feel like, how we kind of get to the next plane of our existence here.
Yeah, and I really think that taking that step forward and putting into practice the idea that you have, whatever it is, the goal to be be an active person. I remember reading an article about a Hollywood writer who had written episodes of Law and Order and just all kinds of different TV shows, and he was kind of the guy they called when they needed a script. And what he would do is every morning at 8 o'clock in the morning, he would write for at least 10 minutes. And oftentimes that would lead to writing for 4 hours or 8 hours. And sometimes it'd be 10 minutes or 20 minutes. But when someone, and he necessarily didn't matter what he was writing, he just wrote something. And whether it was an existing project or something new. But when they called him to say, hey, we need an episode of Law and Order, he had one halfway written.
Yeah.
And he also became a much better writer, kind of back to what you said about just the more times he would sit down and write. And I know that with me, sometimes it's just getting started.
Yeah.
And whether it's at the gym or anything, if you can get through that first 10 minutes, that you can keep going. One of the reasons why I started painting was that I did this thing where I used colored gesso, and it dries really quickly. And I didn't have canvases because they were expensive, so I had drawing paper.
Yeah.
And you could paint on colored gesso, and in about a minute or two it'd be dry enough you could flip the page. And I did these really quick paintings, so I'd maybe do 10 a night, but I was facing that blank page. And the idea that I don't even have I don't know what I'm going to paint. There's nothing, so I would just pick a color randomly. I haven't done yellow, and I just put yellow on the brush, and I just make a mark on the page and try to make something out of it and see where it goes. And sometimes it would go nowhere, and you just flip the page. But not being afraid of the blank page, and not being afraid of how it's going to turn out and of failing, and also that every now and then you would get one that you're like, oh, that's pretty cool. And that was a really good lesson for me, to just be proactive and to not stare at it and dwell on it, and the fact that it was kind of more or less disposable. And that's probably the same way with music. It's that because you have your studio down here, you can come and make something for 3 hours that you end up not using.
That's how, I mean, that's how it ends up being a journal for us, is that it just becomes our creative outlet,
And in that, it's an impression of whatever frame of mind we were in that moment. So it's deeper sometimes than words. Sound somehow is deeper sometimes than words. I don't know what you're able to express in that or capture in that
Your
moment.
words are pretty good.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it.
It's really one of the great things about doing the podcast is I get to meet people like you guys that you're obviously very in love, and you love what you guys do, and you respect each other, and you have so much enjoyment for the music that you do, and so much it comes from your heart. You guys are two of the most authentic people I've ever met, and
Thank you.
That's why your music is so good. I think it comes from a really good, authentic place.
That's pretty much our goal, I guess. And
That's pretty much all we can do, I guess, is be who we are. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, really.
Yeah, I mean, the reason we started making it was because we feel that way about each other. But the reason we put it out is because we hope other people see that not only in us but in themselves.
Yeah.
For sure. And I said this at our last show, that this really did start as an alternative to Netflix, and I guess just to put that out there as an
We still
option
love
in
Netflix,
modern
don't
culture.
we? Yeah,
Oh,
right.
please.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord.
Me too.
It's an amazing platform. But just to put it out there, it's such a modern, such a fast-paced world. We're so absorbed by screen time, blah, blah, blah. So just to come down here and to do something that's a little bit organic, that's a little bit different, it's settling, it's grounding, it's fantastic. And it's a great way to communicate with each other in a way that beyond words, because if we can't even... It's kind of like you said with your paintings. Maybe you would start with a blank page and maybe you would get nothing. But sometimes something would come out of you that clicked and the colors were right, the expression was right. And that's you communicating with yourself.
Yeah.
And us to communicate with each other, to start with a completely blank sonic landscape and to just start throwing sounds in. Those sounds are coming from where we're coming from at the end of our days.
Yeah.
And to sort of blend that together, again, like Nate says, it becomes a journal.
And to make a song that didn't exist
Right.
before, and you brought this thing to life, and the fact that you don't hit every time is
Yeah.
what makes it special. You know, the fact if I would get one good one a night,
Absolutely.
that one was awesome. If every time I did it, I probably wouldn't have spent all winter doing that. And
Yeah.
And
It
one
would
of
have been too easy.
one
Who
of my-
cares about easy?
yeah,
Easy's
one of my
no
big
fun.
regrets these days is, day job, and we're busy all day,
Yeah.
being parents, and a lot of the time one of us is inspired and the other just wants
That's
to
tough.
lay down.
So exhausted.
Yeah.
Oh, just please put
And
me to
one-
bed.
Yeah, one of us
please.
is like, I'm ready to go. I have a great idea. Let's go. And the other one's.
So, well, I'm not sure where you're going with this, but I'm really lucky for the note app on my phone.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
if I'm up and I have a ton of ideas, like I'm just
Yeah, we can
Going to
always
town on that
sketch
and-
out ideas individually.
yeah.
And that's the fun of it too. It usually takes us, what did we figure, 3 days to do a song that's good. It'll either be she comes up with the lines, and then I write the beat the next morning. Like she'll come up. She usually writes at night, so she'll write that night and send it to me, and then I'll write a beat in the morning, and then usually the next morning we'll record. And the morning after that, we mix and kind of finalize it. Mostly it takes a couple days more to get it right.
To get everything fine-tuned
Yeah.
and dialed in and balanced. And
But that's basically our process, or vice versa. I come up with the beat,
yeah, and then I'll take it
and
outside.
I'll send it to her, and she
And
listens
write
in
to it.
headphones, and the
Yeah.
next morning we'll put it down.
that's one of the fun parts of the process. I know I used to always record rehearsals, and then I would listen to them when I drove around. That was what I would
Yeah.
listen to. And so when I get together with the guys, I'd be like, hey, listen, I remember we needed a part for that one song. I heard something at 5 practices ago that I really liked, and I love mining,
Yeah, man.
looking for those little nuggets. And,
Nice.
And
and
I was just gonna say, when I'm outside and I'm writing, I write down everything that comes to mind
Yeah.
because I can't tell you how many times we've been down here working on a song, and I'm like, what's the line? And I'll dig back through the past 4 or 5, poems I've written,
Sure.
pages I've written, and I'm like, okay, there it is. If I take this, string it to that, and we bring it over here, then there's the full arc of what I was trying to get to in these 5 poems. Let's bring it into one stanza
And
Yeah.
and
that,
just make it
that
a
happens
lyric.
a lot in production too.
For sure.
Like I'll come up with, we do a lot of vocoding and things like that, and I'll be like, honestly, like I still like, that's my like experimental point now is like vocoding and manipulation like that. So I'll like learn a new technique, and then I'll, I would have thrown away 3 beats ago, but I had learned that technique, and now I'm like, all right, well, this is gonna be perfect on this one.
yeah, right.
Exactly.
Just waiting for the right time to use.
Yeah.
Now, do you creatively? Does the well ever run dry for periods where you have to go? I got nothing.
So far, I think the pace of life keeps us busy enough that hasn't happened.
Yeah.
Now, if
Good.
we
To be honest, we're creatively pent up.
seriously, like we're
Yeah.
trying to, yeah.
We have so
Work
much to
that
catch up on. It's
No, it's true. We have like 3 or 4. in the
that's
works,
also a
4 or
good problem to
5.
have, I guess.
Yeah.
You know.
It definitely. I one thing I appreciate about my job at the hospital is that for 3 days a week, 12-hour days, I can't work on anything else, and so it gives me time to think about it, to stop,
Yeah.
and consider what I'm doing, and just to step away from it, but also to want to do it. As much as I like riding motorcycles, there's something about being inside on a sunny day and missing it.
That makes
when
it
I have
so
a day
much
off, I'm
better.
like, oh,
Yeah.
you need
Yeah.
that difference in the
No,
two.
you're right. I don't know what it is about this plane of existence
Yeah.
that we need
Yeah.
the torture to have the
Yeah.
the
Well,
satisfaction,
There
but it's
is
so
no
true.
day without a night.
Right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
If you won the lottery and this was before you had kids,
I
and
would
all
be
you would
so
do is
bored.
you would if all you had to do all day is make music, you'd be like, well, you kind of have to have that where you can't do it, so that
Yeah.
when you do it, you approach it with appreciation and gusto and
Absolutely.
Well,
Yeah.
we said it in the beginning of the podcast, art is a reflection of life, but I truly feel that great art needs great suffering.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah, they're really great artists, and the drive to create does come from, I think, a discontent and a
Sure.
sadness and suffering and the need to deal with all that stuff and process all that.
Yeah.
And that's when it's most relatable to people because everybody suffers too.
Mhm.
And so whether by making beautiful music or sad music or something, that's why music's so powerful because it helps people to feel like they're not alone in that.
Yeah.
100%.
I think
I mean, I've I don't want to say been blessed, but that's the best word I can think of. You know, music is truly the universal language, but there are infinite dialects,
yeah.
True.
and that's basically my musical goal is to learn as many of those dialects as I can. I have a great respect for the traditional music of Appalachia, and you know, I play Irish fiddle as much as I can.
Yeah.
But that's one of the main reasons I love hip hop is because any kid in any country can do it.
Yeah.
You know, one friend will beatbox and the other one will rap,
Yeah.
and I mean, it's so humbling to see, you know, kids who haven't eaten in days, who are bombed out of their homes, living in refugee camps, getting in a cipher.
Yeah, right.
And just battling it out like, and they could slay anybody that you know.
Right. It really does bring it to everybody.
Yeah. 100%.
When we were in LA, my one of the projects that I worked on, it was two Palestinian brothers, an Iraqi, a Syrian, and Sudani,
Oh, nice.
and they killed the game of hip hop.
It's very true. It's very true.
Not only are they insane rhyme lyrical masters, like literally we would take trips from LA to San Fran to play shows. How long is that? That's like a 4-hour drive, 5 hours. And I would put on a beat that I was working on, and they would literally freestyle the entire trip nonstop.
Fantastically.
Like
I wasn't on this particular trip that he's speaking of, but I heard these dudes freestyle continuously. They were unbelievable. Are unbelievable. If
Yeah.
anybody ever has the opportunity, look up Omar Offendum. He is our Syriana Americana.
yeah, the Philistines.
Inspirational. Fantastic. Narcy,
Narcy.
the narcissist,
Yep.
Yeah.
will blow your mind. These
Yeah.
are amazing people.
Yeah, and all these kids, I mean, you know, just come from. If you think any American has a bad, which
Some do, yeah.
some of us
Sure, of
surely
course.
do, but we
Humans.
don't know the suffering that you know that these Middle Eastern kids know, and for them to come out and their words, even that they think of in a split second, is such just
They're very
inspirational
gifted writers.
poetry.
Very.
It's amazing. You know, their perspective.
Yeah. And they it sounds like they've channeled what they've been through,
Yeah.
and they've been able to.
And they use it to educate everybody else about the predicament of where they come from.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Incredible people.
And you know, I'm a West Virginia boy. Like I was raised pretty sheltered.
Yeah. Me too. Yeah.
Yeah. And to come, you know, to LA and just be witness to these folks that have been through more problems and, you know, by the time they were 12 than
Yeah.
I will ever face. And they, I mean, they're just the most delightful people, hospitable, carry on
Witty,
traditions.
Fantastic.
And a lot of them, you know, most of those folks were raised in the U.S. and they respect us too.
Yeah.
You know, it really, it makes me so angry to see these days the focus on our differences, you know, and It's a sad state that we're in, but
Yeah.
things like hip hop and the arts.
Exactly. It's disappointing.
unite all of
Again,
us.
negativity across the board is disappointing, and looking at our differences is disappointing. Looking at our samenesses and
Yeah.
looking at what we can contribute to each other
Yeah.
and how we can be creative and positive together.
And being afraid of the differences instead of appreciating them.
Yeah.
And
Afraid, period. That's
Yeah.
the wrong platform to
Yeah.
approach life from.
I
You'll
said in
never
my-
get to a good place if you start afraid.
I said in my graduation speech, those that we feel we have the most difference with often offer us the greatest opportunity of learning.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's it. They do. That's
Yeah,
it.
and I think that there are certain people that they like the fear and they want to play into
Oh, yeah.
people's innate fears of different
Sure.
things and things that we're not used to, and they don't encourage the perspective that you just expressed.
Correct.
That they encourage the opposite. They
Yeah.
people that are afraid, they seek comfort from the big brother and
Yeah.
and the protection of the government and I think though that people are becoming more educated and more aware than the powers that be can keep up with, and even though it seems like right now it's a really low point in a lot of things,
Yeah.
I think it's for them. This is the calm before the storm.
Yeah.
I think that
Yeah.
there's this wave that's underneath.
Yeah.
That when it's like a tsunami, and when it hits, you're gonna, because there are more people that are embracing DIY, and they're starting to see the nonsense and everything, and there are all these big corporatized things like music and radio and television that are now coming to where a person with a little bit of equipment, and that's just media related, but I think that all these forces that control things in a big
Mhm.
way for generations, they're starting to crumble.
Sure.
And right now, things are really bad because I think they're in their death throes, and they're
Exactly.
putting up that last fight. So it's ugly, and it'll get uglier. But I think on the other side of that, you're going to see this new horizon, for lack of a better term, where.
But I think this is it's a very American problem for right now.
It
You know,
is.
because we're so entrenched in America, whether you want to be or not.
Yeah.
You know, we're a relatively new country, and I think most of the countries have had to fight this battle before us.
Well, and I think what people define being an American is, and how they define America, really isn't what America is all about. I think that,
Sure.
in fact, a lot of the things that people like to claim as being American are really very un-American.
Yeah.
And it's as simple as, give us your cold, hungry, and starving people.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, I mean, that's what America's about, but people that claim to be true Americans and for the American way want to reject that. And but I really do think that it may get uglier,
Yeah.
but I think on the other end of that there's going to be that reflex where it's going to be much better in the end, and we're a society that, as you said, we're new. We've had access to this technology, which it's great for what we're doing, podcasts and music and that, but there's also nuclear weapons, and we're almost like adolescents with a car, and
Oh, yeah.
and we're not able to handle all this technology. It just happened too fast. So, but eventually, I think the technology is gonna force us to grow up.
Yeah. Grow with it anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
either you're going to grow with it or you're going to get,
Yeah.
I see, especially when it comes to media, I think NBC, CBS, ABC, iHeartRadio just went out of business. All those old institutions are barely holding on, and when they do, there will be a certain loss because they didn't make like Game of Thrones. possible.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, they're going to open the door for other things.
How are
And-
newspapers still around? What in the heck?
Yeah, it is. A lot of them are around because they, local newspapers. I think they rely on older readers, and I think some of the
Sure.
bigger papers, you pick a side, and then that's what happened to cable news.
Yeah.
They picked a side, and that's because it's dying, and the only way to remain alive is to really pick a side. So it's one of those things that's real easy to say. Well, they're all one-sided, but when you kind of peel back the layer of the onion, I think that's where I try to be perceptive. Why do we have such divisiveness?
Yes.
And when you think about it, well, it's because they have nowhere else to go. The music industry is lost the stranglehold on a lot of things. So
Oh yeah.
they're kind of in their death throes as far as being really shady to the musicians that they do hire and putting out pretty safe, predictable music. And
That's another problem with the technology is it's extremely hard. It's probably harder than ever to make a living off making music.
Yeah.
Because things like Spotify and Apple Music, they don't pay
yeah,
anything. The friend I was talking about earlier, Andre Lindell, he produced that Justin Bieber single, and there's an entire documentary, interview about that situation that I won't get too deep into, but millions and millions. You may or may not know the song, but
But
it
the song was Justin Bieber's his first #1 radio hit.
yeah,
And Andre was not the only producer. There were
he
several,
wasn't,
however.
but he.
I think I am aware of that actually. It was so many millions of plays,
Yeah.
but it was part of a cent or something like that per play.
Yes.
So even though it was hugely popular,
Yeah.
the actual payout at the end was
and
nothing.
then divided
Yes.
between the team
Because
and
they're-
each individually
Yeah,
paid.
because this is such a new medium, they're basically writing their own rules,
Yeah.
and they're not paying. The folks that sold a vinyl, they got a percentage
Yeah.
of that was said, and they did pretty well.
Yeah.
If I have this record, they're probably doing all right from it.
Well, and it used to be with musicians. I think you would make a record and then you'd go out on tour to support the record
Yeah.
to get the record sales. And now it's the money comes from the touring and the
Yeah.
live dates, and the record is a way to get people
To the shows.
to the shows. And so it's
Now it's about selling T-shirts.
selling T-shirts
I
and,
don't know, yeah.
and
I mean, you have
merchandising.
artists like who was it, A Boogie with the Hoodie, who he literally wouldn't put out a song until he was like, if I can get 2,000 likes,
Yeah.
I'll put this out today. So he literally built this entire following just based on internet fans,
Yeah.
and then networking anyway, blah blah blah.
I think
so
Logic
he
did
built
the
his
same
empire
thing,
that
right?
way. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
it is tough. But I think for the good news is for the people that, and I think Josh Taylor brought this up, that if you have 1,000 people that really like everything you do, and if you make a T-shirt and you put out an album and you play in their city and all that you can make a living. Not necessarily the Tommy Lee where you tear down $1 million mansion so that you can build a parking lot for all your Ferraris. Which who wants that? I mean, that's not really a happy life. If you can make enough to live on and do the thing you love, that kind of comes full circle back to what we were talking about before. But I guess if I could make a living between doing the podcast and some of the other things I do, it would be okay. I don't think I'd want to put all my eggs in one basket, but there are people that started a little podcast the way this is that have gone on to be able to make a living out of it.
And I guess that also depends on what you call making a living.
Yeah, well, you make a living too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and definitely it's the financial need of the person, and
Yeah.
I think they said the Pittsburgh guy, the YouTube guy,
Pittsburgh Dead.
Pittsburgh Dad. I think
Pittsburgh Dad is hilarious.
yeah, and that's what he does for a living. And someone said, I might be wrong, so don't quote me, but he makes like $80,000 a year as Pittsburgh Dad.
That's a pretty decent living.
Hey, He's
That's
not
a
making
huge
the guy that plays Sheldon. He's not making that money.
Yeah.
But if you can live in Pittsburgh and make a YouTube videos and make $80,000 a year, that's
Yeah.
That's
Beats-
not so bad.
that's not too bad.
Maybe they should switch it from the phrase "making a living" to "making a life."
Making a life.
Right, making a life. I don't want to make a living. I want to make a life.
Well, I think that's a perfect ending. You asked me how long the
Beautiful.
podcast usually go. I think we're probably 220 or something, and it went by like.
We had such a great
I know.
time talking.
Oh, well, I had a
Thank
great
you.
time listening to you guys and
Aw.
enjoyed this conversation immensely. And I think that this is one step towards your goal of inspiring people to build a studio. And
Fingers crossed.
if they're not musicians, hopefully it'll inspire people, whatever it is that they think they might like to do, to not
Yeah.
think they might like to do it, but do it.
Yeah.
And
Anything that you wake up in the morning that makes you happy to think about, go
Yeah.
out and do it.
and if you don't have something that makes you happy, doesn't mean that you can't. So
No,
find that
absolutely.
thing and
Educate yourself.
educate yourself.
Read everything you can get your hands
And if
on.
you think you might enjoy doing something, try it. And if you can always try something else, whether it's creative or it's you always wanted to play tennis, you always wanted to, I don't know, do backflips off of a high dive at a swimming pool, whatever it is that you think will broaden your horizons, get out there and do it, and don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to try something else if in your heart it's not there, but you have no idea what you can fall in love with until you try.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for the great meal and the great
Come
conversation.
back anytime.
I'm sure you'll see me again. Maybe I'll bring Alvin over and
Yeah.
and,
Come over, we'll grill and chill.
Yeah, it'd be awesome. I love that idea.
Perfect.
Well, everybody, thank you for listening, and until the next time, see ya.
Bye.
Bye. Have a great night.
Lost in love is alright with me. Car and drive with no place to be. One heartbeats for both you and me. Let's make today our favorite memory. Push and pull me with your gravity. I dig your wind, but not your brevity. Let's pause so we can get some clarity. I'm into the fact that you're into me. I'm into the fact that you're into me. I'm into the fact that you're into me. Let's wrap this up, I'll take it home with me. Show it off to the family, formally. Put my best shoes on and take it out with me. Take it to places no one else has seen. It's a pleasure to meet you. It's a pleasure to meet you. Lost in love is alright with me. Car and drive with no place to be. One heartbeats for both you and me. Let's make today our favorite memory. Push and pull me with your gravity. I dig your wind, but not your brevity. Let's pause so we can get some clarity. I'm into the fact that you're into me, 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 into me,